Hello, humanoids. This is Ian T. Mello, and welcome to Squared Circle History, the podcast that chooses a promotion, focuses on a specific year, and gives a comprehensive and unbiased look at the best matches, moments, promos, and feuds. I encourage you to check out the actual footage of the wrestling events that are being discussed because, and I cannot stress this enough, the intent of this podcast is to make new fans of the product of the yesteryear. I'm a lifelong wrestling fan, and I love all of the history that there is of televised professional wrestling. So let's travel through history together here on Squared Circle History. Today we are going to continue our journey through World Championship Wrestling and focus on 1990 and what a year it was. To put you in the right time frame, let's go through what was happening in pop culture during the year of 1990. In theaters, we saw the release of memorable films such as Home Alone, Goodfellas, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, It, Misery, The Godfather Part 3, Miller's Crossing, Crybaby, Edward Scissorhands, King of New York, Kindergarten Cop, Captain America, Total Recall, Darkman, RoboCop 2, Predator 2, Gremlins 2, Back to the Future 3, Pretty Woman, Hard to Kill, Problem Child, Men at Work, Ernest Goes to Jail, and Ghost. In music stores, we saw the release of notable albums such as Cowboys from Hell by Pantera, Violator by Depeche Mode, Bossa Nova by the Pixies, Rust in Peace by Megadeth, America's Most Wanted by Ice Cube, Mama Said Knock You Out by LL Cool J, Persistence of Time by Anthrax, Beg to Differ by Prong, Sex Packets by Digital Underground, Empire by Queensryche, Danzig 2 Lucifuge by Danzig, Shake Your Moneymaker by the Black Crowes, People's Instinctive Travels in the Paths of Rhythm by A Tribe Called Quest, Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy, Ragged Glory by Neil Young, Frizzle Fry by Primus, Seasons in the Abyss by Slayer, The Razor's Edge by AC/DC, Time's Up by Living Colour, and X by INXS. On television, we saw the debuts of classic shows such as Law and Order, Twin Peaks, Northern Exposure, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Beverly Hills 90210, Mr. Bean, The Flash, Wings, Blossom, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Captain Planet, Swamp Thing, The Ben Stiller Show, Tailspin, and Bobby's World. Hulk Hogan attempted to pass the torch to the Ultimate Warrior in the WWF, but all this paled in comparison to what was happening in World Championship Wrestling. Despite backstage tension between management and wrestlers, the company was gaining momentum thanks to the tremendous popularity of breakout star Sting. But it was the return to form of a legendary faction that would shake things up in the promotion. Join us on this trip as we travel back to WCW in 1990. The January 5th episode of the Power Hour featured Flyin' Brian Pillman in action against Cactus Jack. It was an exciting back-and-forth encounter, with Pillman rolling up Cactus with a crucifix to score the pinfall victory. The January 6th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Teddy Long introduce the newest skyscraper, Mean Mark Callis. Out came Callis, who joined Dangerous Dan Spivey in winning an enhancement match in impressive fashion. Following the bout, Jim Ross interviewed the New Skyscrapers and Teddy Long, who confirmed that they needed to replace Sid while he's injured. Callis proved to be just as mean and even more agile. The Dynamic Dudes were successful in their match, defeating Cactus Jack and Lee Scott. Following the bout, Cactus attacked his partner and viciously clotheslined him to the floor. Jim Ross introduced the returning team of the Rock and Roll Express, with Ricky Morton saying that they were the tag team of the 80s, and now they'll prove to be the tag team of the 90s. Jim Ross interviewed the United States champion, the Total Package Lex Luger, who said that his destiny in 1990 is to become the World Heavyweight Champion. Cactus Jack attacked an enhancement Talon and took over for a match against Wildfire Tommy Rich. While Cactus put up a solid effort, Rich scored a pinfall victory after a sunset flip. After Sting and Arn Anderson won their enhancement match, Jim Ross interviewed the Four Horsemen. Nature Boy Ric Flair praised the skills of Sting, who raised his four fingers and said that it was an honor to be a part of the most elite group in wrestling. The January 12th edition of the Power Hour saw Gordon Solie announce on his WWN segment that former NWA World Heavyweight Champion Kerry Von Erich is a free agent and may be negotiating with the NWA. The Nature Boy Ric Flair defended the NWA World Heavyweight Championship against Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. During the bout, Woman made her way to the ring, backed by the giant Nitron. Flair fought off Gilbert and defeated him by reversing a small package for a pinfall victory. In the main event, the Great Muta defended the World Television Championship against the Enforcer Arn Anderson. Fellow J-Tex members Buzz Sawyer and the Dragon Master stood in the corner of Muta. Anderson was in trouble, with Muta crashing onto him with a judo chop off the top rope. Muta took the fight to Anderson until Double A fought back with a reverse atomic drop to rattle the champion. Anderson followed it up with a thunderous spinebuster in the middle of the ring. Sensing defeat, the Dragon Master hopped onto the apron to distract the official. Sawyer leapt off the top rope, clobbering Anderson with a forearm smash to the back of the head. Muta made the cover, with Anderson barely kicking out. The champion struck Anderson with a roundhouse kick to the chest and climbed to the top rope. Muta moonsaulted, with Anderson getting his knees up to smash the mouth of the champion. Anderson spiked Muta with a big DDT and scored the pinfall victory to become the new World Television Champion. The January 13th episode of World Championship Wrestling featured a clip from the main event. Norman unveiled a painting that he'd done of Woman, presenting it to her in the middle of the ring in hopes that she'd like him. Woman didn't appreciate the quality of the artwork, throwing the painting to the mat in anger. She then slapped Norman across the face. Nitron stepped in front of Woman to shield her, only for Norman to attack the big man. Kevin Sullivan ran in, smashing the painting over the head of Norman and smearing it in his face. Jim Cornette introduced the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who joined him for an interview. Cornette asked Flair if he's dodging Lex Luger, since it was announced that Sting would be receiving a World Championship match at Wrestle War. Flair clarified that Sting earned his title shot and is more than deserving of it. Woman interrupted, with Nitron trailing close behind. She said that she can help Flair with a lot of things, professionally. Flair said that if he let Woman in the door, the other horsemen would have a hard time concentrating on their business. He left by saying, "You are awesome, baby." Woman said that she wanted to rule the wrestling world. To do that, she'd have to rule the Four Horsemen. Later, Jim Ross interviewed the Four Horsemen, asking if an impending match between the World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair and Sting was a conflict of interest. Flair dispelled this, saying that Sting is one of the greatest athletes in the world and deserves a title shot. The champion shook Sting's hand, with the Stinger saying that they want to keep the world title in the family. Both Andersons congratulated Sting, saying that he earned his title shot. The January 14th episode of the main event saw the Rock and Roll Express in action against the Fabulous Freebirds. Michael P.S. Hayes and Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin used illegal tactics to double-team Ricky Morton on the floor. Shrieks from female fans in the crowd echoed through the arena as Morton was battered mercilessly. Still, Morton battled through the pain and made the hot tag to Robert Gibson, who cleaned house. Just as Gibson had all the momentum, he tried to bounce against the ropes. Garvin pulled down the rope, with Gibson tumbling to the floor. The dynamic dudes raced to the ring to inform the referee of what happened, with the Freebirds attacking. Just then, the Midnight Express hit the scene to cause even more pandemonium as the referee called for the bell. The January 19th edition of the Power Hour saw the United States Champion Lex Luger defend his title against Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert in an exciting encounter. Despite injuring his ankle, Gilbert attempted to dive off the top rope. Luger caught Gilbert, dropping him throat first on the top rope. Gilbert writhed in pain, with Luger scoring the pinfall victory to retain his title. Terry Funk hosted Funk's Grill, with Cactus Jack joining the show. Cactus discussed his priorities, saying he'd rather hurt a man than love a woman. Funk asked where money ranks on his list, with Cactus saying, "Not very high." This perked Funk's interest, asking Cactus to come work at the Double Cross Ranch. Cactus shifted gears, saying that anybody that doesn't tell him the truth will suffer the consequences. Funk asked Cactus if maybe everybody else is fine and he's insane. Cactus didn't agree. In the main event, Arn Anderson defended the World Television Championship against the Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer. It was physical, with Anderson taking a beating. Sawyer charged at Anderson, who dodged the Mad Dog, with Sawyer crashing into the corner. Anderson planted Sawyer with a spine buster, with the Dragon Master racing into the ring to save his stablemate. The Great Muta followed, spitting green mist into the eyes of Anderson. Muta assisted the Dragon Master in drilling Anderson with a spike pile driver. Ole Anderson raced to the scene, only to be outnumbered and pummeled. Muta locked Ole in a figure 4 leg lock, with Sawyer connecting with a big splash off the top rope. The January 26th episode of the Power Hour saw the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, the World Television Champion Arn Anderson, and Sting battle the Great Muta, Buzz Sawyer, and the Dragon Master. Sting electrified the crowd with their roars reaching a deafening pitch. The Stinger press-slammed Muta over the top rope, taking out Sawyer and the Dragon Master on the floor. Just when the Stinger was turning the Dragon Master over in the Scorpion Deathlock, Sawyer clobbered him over the back with a forearm. Flair tagged in, locking Muta in a figure 4. Sawyer broke the hold and pummeled the champion, Irish whipping him over the corner post and to the floor. Muta and the Dragon Master double-teamed Flair, weakening the champion before rolling him back into the ring. After a 3-on-1 beatdown, Flair escaped the J-Tex members and made the tag to Sting. In mere moments, Sting had Sawyer locked in the Scorpion Deathlock, only for Muta to break the hold by spraying green mist in the eyes of the Stinger to cause a disqualification. Pandemonium ensued, with everyone brawling and Sting in harm's way. Muta locked the leg of Sting, allowing Sawyer to connect with a big splash off the top rope. Flair and Anderson ran off the J-Tex members, with Sting left laid out. The January 27th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Dr. Death Steve Williams face Cactus Jack in a hard-hitting bout. They battled to the floor, with Williams Irish whipping Cactus against a steel guardrail with such force that it knocked him into the first row. Williams followed, suplexing Cactus back over the guardrail. Back in the ring, Williams continued to overpower Cactus, even tossing him over the top rope with a fall-away slam. Once back in the ring, Cactus hit Williams with his best shots, but couldn't keep Dr. Death down. They battled to the floor, with Williams carrying Cactus completely around the ring and press-slamming him onto the concrete. Returning to the ring, Williams slammed Cactus with an Oklahoma Stampede and scored the pinfall victory. Jim Ross interviewed Sting, asking him how he was adjusting to life as a horseman. Sting admitted to having a good time, but said he has little stingers that look up to him. Ross caught Sting off guard, asking if he was ready for his match at Wrestle War against the World Heavyweight Champion, Nature Boy Ric Flair. Before Sting could respond, Flair interrupted with the World Television Champion Arn Anderson and a group of women in tow. With a woman on each arm, Sting said that this was one time he didn't mind being interrupted. Anderson said, "When you earn the kind of income the Horsemen do, it dictates being a champion. Because when you afford this kind of beauty and look around yourself, you've gotta be a winner." As soon as Ross asked Flair about what he thought of Woman, she marched to the scene with Nitron close behind. Woman said that she knows that she can help Flair. He responded, calling Woman beautiful, but saying that they can't mix business with pleasure. Insulted, she said, "When you're finished with girls, let me know when you're ready for Woman." In 8-man tag action, the Rock and Roll Express teamed with the Dynamic Dudes to face the Fabulous Freebirds and the Midnight Express, who had Jim Cornette in their corner. Ricky Morton took a beating, getting beat down by all 4 of his opponents, and even saw Jim Cornette get in a few cheap shots with his tennis racket. Ever resilient, Morton held his own and made the tag to Shane Douglas, who cleaned house, even knocking Cornette off the apron with a dropkick. Johnny Ace hoisted Stan Lane up for a suplex, with Douglas connecting with a missile dropkick off the top rope to knock Lane to the mat. Douglas made the cover, but the referee was preoccupied. This allowed beautiful Bobby Eaton to hit the Alabama Jam off the top rope, allowing Lane to roll onto Douglas and score the pinfall victory for his team. Jim Cornette interviewed Flying Brian Pillman, and the Z-Man Tom Zink, who took turns insulting Cornette's clothes and his love life. Cornette said that they'd never wrestled a team like the Midnight Express, and they're going to have to sweat if that match ever happens. Zink admitted that it was a little hot, and used Cornette's tie to wipe the sweat from his brow. In the main event, Arn Anderson defended the World Television Championship against Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert in a great bout. Gilbert hit Anderson with the hot shot, with Anderson landing too close to the ropes for Gilbert to make a pin. Instead, Gilbert leapt off the top rope, with Anderson catching and slamming him with a big spine buster to score the pinfall victory. The February 2nd episode of the Power Hour saw Terry Funk interview the World Television Champion Arn Anderson on Funk's Grill. Funk said that Anderson is going to have to pick a side at Wrestle War if it ends up being Ric Flair against Sting. Anderson said, "Win, lose, or draw, each man is gonna be a man." He said, "No matter who wins, it's still in the family." Funk accused Anderson of having eyes for women, with Anderson saying that they never mix business with pleasure. Anderson said, "The name of the game is wrestling." In the main event, the Nature Boy Ric Flair defended the World Heavyweight Championship against the Z-Man Tom Zink. Observing from ringside was Woman, with Nitron by her side and a devious grin on her face. Flair grew frustrated, with Zink taking his best moves and kicking out repeatedly. Zink came alive, sending the champion to the floor and suplexing him back into the ring. He rolled up Flair, with the champion rolling through and hooking the tights to get the 3 count and retain the title. The February 3rd edition of World Championship Wrestling saw the world's strongest man, Doug Furnas, make his debut, tossing Galaxian number 2 around with ease. Furnas hoisted his opponent up in the Samson Squeeze, picking up a submission victory for an impressive showing. Jim Cornette hosted the Louisville Slugger, announcing that the segment had been purchased by the new host, Woman. With Nitron by her side, Woman said that she wanted the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, to come out and say no to her face. Out came Flair, who told Woman that the 4 Horsemen don't mix business with pleasure. Woman said that she'd be at the Clash of the Champions, and she wanted Flair to say no then. The Clash of the Champions 10 took place on February 6th, and saw Terry Funk introduce the 4 Horsemen. Ole Anderson cut to the chase, saying that Sting would no longer be a member of the Horsemen. Sting looked on in confusion, with Ole saying that there had been a long-term plan to take him out, but the Nature Boy Ric Flair told them to hold off. Once Sting signed the contract to challenge for the championship, Ole said that he signed his death warrant. Ole urged Sting to cancel the contract, saying he had 2 hours to make up his mind. Sting was quick to say, "Not a chance." Ole said Sting had 2 hours, with Sting barking back. This caused Flair, Ole, and Arn to pummel Sting, with an angry Nature Boy screaming at him before slapping him in the face. Cactus Jack competed against the legendary masked luchador, Mil Mascaras. After a great display of high-flying maneuvers, Mascaras dropkicked Cactus off the apron. Cactus fell backwards, landing on the exposed concrete floor and smashing the back of his head. Mascaras nailed a high crossbody off the top rope, scoring a pinfall victory over Cactus Jack. An angry Cactus pouted up the aisle, taking his anger out on the live band. The drummer raced at Cactus, with the two engaging in a slugfest. Terry Funk interviewed the United States champion Lex Luger, who said that Sting should be happy where he is. Luger is the rightful number one contender and said that he was on the verge of becoming the World Heavyweight Champion. He said that everything he touches turns to gold, and now he will achieve his ultimate goal. The Road Warriors battled the Skyscrapers in a hard-hitting bout that saw Dangerous Dan Spivey feel the Doomsday Device. Mean Mark Callis broke up a pinfall attempt by leaping off the top rope with a steel chair and smashing it across the back of Animal. Meanwhile, Paul Ellering knocked out Teddy Long on the ring apron. Spivey and Callis drilled Hawk with a spike piledriver. Wielding a steel chair, Spivey bashed both Hawk and Animal, leaving them unconscious. The Steiner brothers put their WCW World Tag Team Championships on the line to face Doom, who put their masks on the line. Rick Steiner ripped off the mask of one member of Doom, revealing the identity to be Hacksaw Butch Reed. As a confused Reed asked for advice from his partner, Rick rolled him up for the 3 count. The second member of Doom revealed his identity to be Ron Simmons. In the main event, the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, the World Television Champion Arn Anderson, and Ole Anderson faced the Great Muta, the Dragon Master, and the Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer in a steel cage match. All 6 took turns bouncing one another off the cage in a brutal, hard-hitting encounter. Sting raced to the ring, attempting to climb into the cage. Doug Dillinger led a slew of wrestlers and officials to ringside to pull Sting down from the cage and escort him away up the aisle. Sting broke free, racing back and climbing the cage, but landing awkwardly on the floor and legitimately blowing out his knee. Meanwhile, Sawyer leapt off the top of the cage with a big splash. Anderson moved, with Sawyer crashing onto the mat. Anderson planted the Dragon Master with a DDT and picked up a pinfall victory. Flair raced up the aisle, brawling with Sting, with officials pulling them apart to end the broadcast. The February 10th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Wildfire Tommy Rich battle the Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer. It was hard-hitting, reigniting their rivalry from the early 80s in Georgia Championship Wrestling. Sawyer leapt off the top rope with a diving headbutt. Rich moved, with Sawyer crashing to the mat. Still, Sawyer caught Rich and planted him with a big power slam to pick up the pinfall victory. The February 11th edition of the main event saw the Road Warriors team with Dr. Death Steve Williams to battle the Samoan SWAT team and the Samoan Savage in 6-man tag action. Jim Ross announced that the Horseman had attacked Sting and injured his knee, severing his patella. Sting was due for surgery the following Tuesday, meaning that his World Heavyweight title match against the Nature Boy Ric Flair at WrestleWar was officially cancelled. The February 17th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross interview Flying Brian Pillman, who said that he was disappointed by the actions of Ric Flair at the Clash of the Champions. Flair made his way out with Woman by his side, telling Pillman to his face that if he doesn't like it, he can try to shut the champion up. Pillman didn't back down, agreeing to face Flair in the main event. Jim Ross interviewed Sting from his doctor's office, discussing his knee injury. Sting said that the doctors aren't optimistic about his recovery and believe that he'll be out of action between 6 months to 1 year. He wished Lex Luger luck, since he'd be receiving the World Heavyweight title shot at WrestleWar. Cactus Jack Manson teamed with his new partner, Kevin Sullivan, for a tag team match. When Cactus wasn't in the ring, he sat on the apron and read the book, How to Give Yourself Relief from Pain. Sullivan became angry, telling Cactus to pay attention instead of reading from his book. That's all Cactus needed to hear, equaling Sullivan in intensity. On the floor, Sullivan bent his opponent's spine first over his knee, with Cactus running off the apron and dropping a big elbow onto his prone opponent. Cactus rolled Lee Scott into the ring and scored the pinfall victory. Jim Ross interviewed the WCW World Tag Team Champions, the Steiner Brothers, who were interrupted by the Andersons. Ole attempted to convince the Steiners to back out of their scheduled match at Wrestle War. The Steiners had no intention of doing such thing, with both teams brawling. Arn drilled Rick Steiner with a DDT and stole the tag team titles with Ole. Jim Cornette hosted the Louisville Slugger, joined by his guest, the United States Champion Lex Luger. The Horseman and Woman interrupted, with Ole Anderson attempting to convince Luger to back out of his World Heavyweight Championship match at Wrestle War. Luger laughed, irritating Ole even further, but giving him until the end of the show to back out of the match with Nature Boy Ric Flair. As the Horsemen made their exit, Luger said, "I don't meet deadlines, the total package sets them." Footage was shown from a recent bout between the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express, who had Jim Cornette in their corner. Cornette interfered incessantly, striking Ricky Morton repeatedly with the tennis racket. Sweet Stan Lane tossed beautiful Bobby Eaton, who landed on Morton with the rocket launcher. Morton kicked out of a pinfall attempt at 2. Eaton climbed to the top rope once again, only for Robert Gibson to knock him off, sending him crashing to the floor. Back in the ring, Morton dodged a clothesline, with Lane taking out his own partner. This allowed Morton to make the tag to Gibson, who cleaned house and made the cover. Cornette pulled Gibson out of the ring to break the count, with Gibson punching him in the face. Eaton used the tennis racket to bash Gibson, allowing Lane to pick up the 3 count to give the Midnight Express the victory. Shane Douglas took the World Television Champion Arn Anderson to his limit in a great back-and-forth bout. Ole Anderson got involved at ringside, whipping Douglas shoulder first against a ring post before rolling him back into the ring. Arn honed in on the injured shoulder, with the referee eventually stopping the match. Ole distracted the referee, allowing Arn to further pummel the shoulder of Douglas. The Steiner brothers raced to the ring, with the Andersons retreating. In the main event, Woman led the Nature Boy Ric Flair to the ring to defend the World Heavyweight Championship against Flyin' Brian Pillman. The champion found himself in trouble in the early moments, with Pillman battering Flair with ease. Flair attempted to take a breather and walked up the aisle, with Pillman chasing after him. It was a trap, with the champion whipping around and sticking his thumb in Pillman's eye to gain the advantage. Flair rammed Pillman's head repeatedly against a steel guardrail until the two battled back into the ring. The champion dropped a knee onto the head of Pillman, with the fans rallying and chanting, "Go Brian, go." Flair nailed a double-arm suplex, with Pillman barely kicking out. The champion slammed Pillman to the mat with a big suplex, with the challenger refusing to stay down. Pillman wrenched in a sleeper hold, with Flair back suplexing him to the mat to break the hold. Flair attempted a figure 4, only for Pillman to roll him up for a 2 count. The champion honed in on Pillman's left knee, soon locking in the figure 4. Pillman writhed in pain, with Flair hanging onto the ropes to apply more pressure as the referee had his back turned. With the fans cheering him on, Pillman reversed the hold, and it was Flair's turn to scream in pain. Flair rolled out of the ring to break the hold, with Pillman suplexing him back in and crashing to the mat. Pillman pummeled the champion and soon rolled him up with a sunset flip. Woman reached into the ring, slapping Pillman repeatedly across the face to break the pin attempt. Pillman pleaded his case with the referee until Flair struck him with a high knee to the spine. Flair tried tossing Pillman over the top rope, with the challenger hanging on and hitting the champion with Air Pillman. The referee dove to the mat to make the count, with Flair barely kicking out. Pillman dove off the top rope with a high cross body, landing on the champion. The momentum caused Flair to roll through, hooking the tights and picking up a pinfall victory. As the show came to a close, Lex Luger attacked the Horseman, making his message loud and clear. He's coming for the World Heavyweight Championship. The February 18th episode of the main event saw the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and the World Television Champion Arn Anderson face the Rock and Roll Express. Flair and Anderson took a beating in the early minutes, even seeing Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson lock in stereo figure 4s. Morton rolled up Flair, with Anderson breaking it up by pounding on the neck of Morton with a double axe handle. Flair and Anderson wore down Morton, battering him as the fans chanted, "Rock and roll." With the referee's back turned, Flair assisted Anderson in dropping Morton throat first onto the top rope. It proved to be effective, with Anderson scoring the pinfall victory. The February 23rd edition of the Power Hour saw the Road Warriors battle Doom in a hard-hitting bout. Ron Simmons pulled the top rope down as Animal ran against the ropes, causing him to take a spill to the floor. This allowed Simmons to capitalize, pummeling Animal, with Butch Reed tagging in to inflict more damage. Reed attempted a big splash, with Animal getting his knees up to provide a harsh landing. Hawk tagged in, cleaning house until things broke down, and all four brawled in the ring. Simmons climbed to the top, only for Hawk to shove him to the floor. Hawk dove off the top rope, hitting Reed with a flying clothesline and scoring the pinfall victory. The February 24th episode of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross interview the Horseman and Woman. Nature Boy Ric Flair hyped his upcoming World Heavyweight Championship match against the Total Package Lex Luger at Wrestle War. Jim Ross reminded them that Luger was in the building, with the Andersons saying that he may not make it out. Jim Cornette led the Midnight Express to the ring to face the team of Flying Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink. Cornette tried to interfere behind the referee's back, but got locked in a sleeper hold courtesy of the Z-Man. Stan Lane grabbed the tennis racket and bashed Zink across the back. Lane made the cover, with Zink barely kicking out. Beautiful Bobby Eaton soared through the air with the rocket launcher, with Zink rolling out of the way and Eaton crashing to the canvas. Pillman soared off the top rope with a high cross body, landing on Lane and scoring the pinfall victory, advancing to the finals of the United States Tag Team Title Tournament. The United States champion Lex Luger was victorious in an enhancement match, but soon found himself surrounded by the Horsemen. Just as the Horsemen moved in, the Steiner brothers raced to Luger's side to even the odds. The Horsemen retreated, with the fans roaring in approval of the alliance between Luger and the Steiner brothers. The February 25th episode of the main event served as the pre-show for Wrestle War 90. Backstage, the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Woman hyped the upcoming showdown with the total package Lex Luger. Flair said that Luger must have butterflies because he wanted to be the Almighty. Gordon Soley interviewed the United States champion Lex Luger, who said that Flair is a scared man with his back against the wall. Wrestle War 90 took place on February 25th live on pay-per-view, starting with Theodore R. Long announcing that Dangerous Dan Spivey was injured and couldn't compete in his match against the Road Warriors. Cactus Jack Manson was in action against the unorthodox Norman in a wild bout. They battled to the floor, with Norman backdropping Cactus over the guardrail and onto the concrete floor. Brawling back into the ring, Norman reversed a piledriver, backdropping Cactus and sitting on him to score the pinfall victory. Jim Cornette led the Midnight Express to the ring for a bout against the Rock and Roll Express. Cornette and referee Nick Patrick nearly brawled in the opening minutes, with the Midnights pulling their manager away to safety. The Rock and Roll got the best of the Midnights, even getting the partners frustrated with one another. It took double teaming behind the referee's back to help the Midnights gain an advantage. Cornette interfered, punching Ricky Morton in the face as the referee was distracted. Morton took a beating, but failed to quit, even after Beautiful Bobby struck with a flying elbow drop off the top rope. The Midnights attempted a rocket launcher, with Morton getting his knees up to provide a harsh landing for Eaton. This allowed Morton to tag in Robert Gibson, who cleaned house. Gibson ran against the ropes, with Cornette waffling him across the back of the head with the tennis racket. Eaton made the cover, but Gibson kicked out. Morton tackled Eaton to the mat, with Gibson rolling up Stan Lane for a pinfall victory. Theodore R. Long led Mean Mark Callis and the Masked Skyscraper to the ring to battle the Road Warriors in a Chicago street fight. Prior to the start, Paul Ellering took out Long with a right hand to the face. Both teams engaged in a hard-hitting brawl, with Doom coming down the aisle in tuxedos to get a closer look and protect Long. After an intense battle, Mean Mark left his partner behind, who fell victim to the Doomsday device. Hawk made the cover, with the Road Warriors scoring the win. The Road Warriors got their hands on Long, tossing him onto Doom on the floor. Doom stood toe-to-toe with the Road Warriors, with both teams engaging in a wild brawl. The Fabulous Freebirds faced Flyin' Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink for the United States Tag Team Championships. Persistent double teaming allowed the Freebirds to gain the advantage and work over Zink. The Z-Man finally made the tag, with Pillman taking out both Freebirds with ease. Michael P.S. Hayes distracted the referee, allowing Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin to ram Pillman's head into a camera. Moments later, Pillman hit Garvin with a high cross body off the top rope, scoring the pinfall victory to retain the titles for Pillman and the Z-Man. The Steiner brothers defended the World Tag Team Championships against Arn and Ole Anderson. It was hard-hitting, ending out of nowhere when Rick rolled up Ole for the 3 count. Arn ambushed Rick and restrained Scott, allowing Ole to drop a knee off the top rope, crashing down onto Scott's shoulder. The injured Sting made his way down the aisle on crutches, sitting ringside to watch the main event. Woman led the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, to the ring to defend his title against the United States Champion, the Total Package Lex Luger. The challenger overpowered the champion, with Flair attempting to retreat, but Luger dragging him back to the ring. Luger cinched in a bear hug, with Flair breaking the hold by sticking his thumb in the challenger's eye. The challenger battled back, lunging at Flair with a clothesline. Flair ducked, with Luger crashing through the ropes into the floor. Woman distracted the referee, with Flair ramming Luger against the steel guardrails around ringside. Woman got involved, bashing Luger across the face behind the referee's back. Luger battled back and tried to lock Flair in a figure 4. Flair rolled out of it and poked Luger in the eye. Still, Luger power slammed Flair and made the cover for a 2 count. Luger used a backslide to roll up Flair, but only got a 2 count. Flair jumped off the top rope, striking Luger with a forearm to the head. The champion slammed Luger with a double arm suplex, with the challenger kicking out at 2. Flair honed in on the left knee of Luger and soon locked in the figure 4, grabbing the ropes for leverage behind the referee's back. Sting hobbled to ringside, cheering Luger on and motivating him to do something. Luger tossed Flair to the mat with a gorilla press slam, followed by a clothesline to the floor. Suplexing Flair back in, Luger made the cover, with Flair barely kicking out. Woman slapped Luger, distracting him to allow Flair to strike with a high knee to the spine that also took out the referee. Luger superplexed Flair to the mat and made the cover, with Flair kicking out. The Andersons raced in, with Luger knocking them down with clotheslines. Luger hoisted Flair up on his shoulders, applying the torture rack. As the referee recovered, the Andersons attacked Sting on the floor. Luger chased after the Andersons, battering them on the floor, with Flair winning the match by countout. The Horsemen battered Luger until the Steiner brothers raced to the ring for the save. The March 2nd edition of the Power Hour saw Jim Cornette host the Louisville Slugger. Cornette was joined by Kevin Sullivan, Cactus Jack Manson, and the Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer, collectively known as the Slaughterhouse. Sullivan said that they don't drive limos, they beat up the people that ride in them. Flying Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink defended the United States Tag Team titles against the Fabulous Freebirds. Jim Cornette got involved, leveling Pillman across the back with a tennis racket as he bounced off the ropes. The Midnight Express ambushed Zink on the floor while the Freebirds pummeled Pillman in the ring. Racing to the ring came the Rock and Roll Express to even the odds, attacking the Midnights. The 4 tag teams battled, with Gordon Soley on commentary calling it a Pier 6 brawl. The March 3rd episode of World Championship Wrestling featured footage from after Wrestle War, with Gordon Soley interviewing the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Woman. Confident, Woman said that if Lex Luger didn't get it done that night, he never will. Flair grasped his championship, saying that he was not only Luger's master, but Sting's as well. The champion threatened Luger, saying If you ride with Sting, you die with Sting. The March 10th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Flying Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink defend the United States Tag Team Championships against the Midnight Express, who had Jim Cornette in their corner. It was a fast-paced bout with the momentum shifting back and forth until Cornette interfered. He bashed Zink across the back with a loaded tennis racket to cause a disqualification. Meanwhile, the Midnights attacked the throat of Pillman, with Cornette holding the handle of the tennis racket over Pillman's throat and Beautiful Bobby Eaton landing an Alabama Jam. Members of the locker room raced to the scene, with Cornette fending them off with the tennis racket. Meanwhile, the Midnights restrained Pillman on the mat, with Cornette striking the throat repeatedly with the tennis racket. The Rock and Roll Express raced to the ring for the save, with Cornette and the Midnights stealing the United States Tag Team titles. The March 17th episode of World Championship Wrestling featured footage of Jim Ross interviewing the United States Tag Team Champions Flying Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink. Ross noted that Jim Cornette is being fined $1,000 per day until he returns the titles back to the rightful champions. An extra raspy Pillman said that the Midnight Express and Cornette might have taken his voice, but they'll never take away his pride. Cornette responded with title in hand, saying that the Midnights were back in possession of their rightful property. He warned Pillman and Zink if they tried to take the belts back, the next beating would be worse than the first. The March 18th edition of the main event saw Ole Anderson introduce the Minnesota Wrecking Crew 2, two large men in red masks. Ole said that they were coming for the Steiners, calling them too soft. The March 23rd episode of the Power Hour saw Cactus Jack battle Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. After wearing one another down with submissions, Cactus knocked Gilbert off the apron and to the floor. After ramming Gilbert chest first into a steel guardrail, Cactus backed up and raced towards his opponent. Gilbert moved, with Cactus crashing into a guardrail and tumbling into the first row. He was then suplexed back over the guardrail and crashing onto the concrete, courtesy of Gilbert. Back in the ring, both men scrambled for a pinfall with 30 seconds remaining. The time limit expired, with both men continuing to brawl, and the match declared a draw. The March 24th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Road Warrior Animal in action against Ron Simmons in a hard-hitting match. Butch Reed stood in his partner's corner, with Hawk coming to the ring to even the odds. Reed slugged Animal in the jaw behind the referee's back. Shortly after, Reed tripped up Animal, with the referee seeing the act and calling for a disqualification. Meanwhile, both the Road Warriors and Doom battled on the floor, with Teddy Long ambushing Paul Ellering inside the ring with a loaded boxing glove. Sting made an appearance, joining Jim Ross for an interview to discuss his physical therapy. Ross asked Sting for his comments on Flair saying that he'll never be the same when he comes back. Sting said Flair was right. He'll be better. The Midnight Express came to the ring wearing the United States Tag Team titles and won an enhancement match. Following the bout, the Midnights were ambushed by the rightful champions, Flying Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink. Pillman and Zink tossed the Midnights to the floor and reclaim their championships. The March 25th episode of the main event saw the World Tag Team Champions, the Steiner Brothers, battle Ole Anderson's team of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew 2. Scott Steiner's injured left arm was a target, with the crew attacking it on the floor. This led to Scott getting counted out, with the Minnesota Wrecking Crew 2 declared the winners. The March 30th edition of the Power Hour saw the Steiner Brothers defend the World Tag Team Championships against Doom in a hard-hitting bout. Teddy Long got involved, bashing Rick Steiner over the head with a loaded boxing glove while the referee was distracted. This allowed Butch Reed to score the pinfall victory, with Doom crowned the new World Tag Team Champions. Paul Ellering informed referee Nick Patrick of the wrongdoing, causing the official to inspect the boxing glove. Steel pliers fell out of the glove and onto the mat, with Patrick reversing the decision, and the titles returned to the Steiner Brothers. The March 31st episode of World Championship Wrestling began with Mike Rotunda facing the Cuban Assassin. During the bout, Norman wheeled a big black box to ringside while Rotunda scored a victory. Cactus Jack raced into the ring to attack Rotunda while Kevin Sullivan lifted the lid off the mysterious box. Out popped Abdullah the Butcher, who attacked Sullivan and Cactus at ringside. Jim Ross interviewed Sting, who was riding on an exercise bike in the gym. Ross was concerned that Sting may be coming back too soon. Sting wasn't concerned and said that he was mentally prepared for the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Kevin Sullivan was scheduled to compete in an enhancement match, but instead informed Cactus Jack to compete in his place. Cactus brutalized his opponent, slamming him on the concrete floor and then running off the ring apron to hit a brutal elbow drop. After rolling his opponent into the ring, Cactus scored the pinfall victory. Sullivan called out Norman and Abdullah the Butcher, who raced to the ring. A brawl ensued around ringside, with Cactus and Sullivan taking a beating at the hands of Norman and Abdullah. The April 6th edition of the Power Hour saw Jim Cornette host another edition of the Louisville Slugger. His guests were the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Woman. Flair announced that he'd appointed Woman to be in charge of all personnel decisions of the Four Horsemen. In the main event, Flair defended the World Heavyweight Championship against Robert Gibson. The challenger put up a great fight, tossing Flair around the ring with ease. Gibson locked Flair in a sleeper hold, with the champion racing towards the corner, with Gibson colliding with the top turnbuckle to break the hold. Flair managed to cover Gibson, hooking his feet on the ropes for leverage out of view of the referee, and picking up a pinfall victory. The April 7th episode of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Cornette interview Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. Samu ambushed Gilbert, smashing a pineapple over the back of his head. Jim Ross interviewed the United States Champion, the Total Package Lex Luger, who challenged the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, to a steel cage match. Footage aired of Lance Russell interviewing Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, who had a box in hand. Garvin claimed that the box contained a gold record that was given to the Fabulous Freebirds. When Garvin opened the box, it was empty. Meanwhile, the Rock and Roll Express made their way to the ring, revealing that they had the gold record. Garvin demanded that they return it, with the Rock and Roll Express instead smashing it. The Rock and Roll Express went on to face the Samoan SWAT team in a number 1 contenders match. Jimmy Garvin interfered, spiking Robert Gibson with a DDT to allow the SST to win the match by pinfall. Jim Cornette hosted the Louisville Slugger, joined by the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Woman. Flair responded to Luger's challenge, accepting and warning the total package of the 3 things that happen in a steel cage match. He said, "You bleed, you sweat, and you pay the price." In the main event, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert battled Sam Moo in a hard-hitting bout. Gilbert rolled out of the way of a diving headbutt, taking the advantage. Sam Moo tossed Gilbert over the top rope out of desperation, causing a disqualification. Gilbert ran back in, brawling with Sam Moo until the referees had to separate the two. The April 13th edition of the Power Hour saw Wildfire Tommy Rich battle Mean Mark Callis. It didn't take long for Callis to take down Rich with the Heart Punch and score the pinfall victory. Sting and Ole Anderson joined via satellite for a face-off, with Ole predicting that Sting would be announcing his retirement. That wasn't the case, with Sting going against Ole's warning and announcing that he'll be at the upcoming Capital Combat pay-per-view. Sting said that he had a big surprise for the Horsemen and the wrestling world. In the main event, Teddy Long led Doom to the ring to challenge the Steiner brothers for the World Tag Team Championships. Long handed Ron Simmons a chair, which he used to attack the injured left arm of Scott Steiner behind the referee's back. The illegal tactics continued, with Doom drilling Scott with a spike pile driver and Butch Reed getting a 2 count. Scott persevered and tagged in his brother, with Rick cleaning house. Ron Simmons used what was referred to as an international object, with the referee seeing the deed and calling for a disqualification. The April 14th edition of World Championship Wrestling featured highlights of a bout between Road Warrior Hawk and Butch Reed. Teddy Long loaded a boxing glove as a weapon, with Ron Simmons using it to bash Hawk across the head behind the referee's back. Reed made the cover, picking up a pinfall victory. Jim Cornette interviewed Teddy Long and Doom, with Cornette presenting Long with a card that would make him an honorary Kentucky colonel. Gracious, Long said that he'd get his financial advisors to make him an honorary black Muslim, saying they'd call him Kareem Mohammed Cornette. Doom had harsh words for the World Tag Team Champions, the Steiner brothers, with Ron Simmons saying, "Move over and let the big dogs eat." With beautiful Bobby Eaton in his corner, Sweet Stan Lane battled the Z-Man Tom Zink, who had Flyin' Brian Pillman in his corner. Eaton interfered to cause a disqualification, resulting in both teams brawling. Jim Cornette's tennis racket came into play, which Zink intercepted and used to bash both members of the Midnight Express. Jim Cornette hosted the Louisville Slugger, introducing the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Woman. The United States Champion Lex Luger interrupted, getting in the face of Flair. While Flair brushed him off and tried to leave, Luger whipped him back around. Flair slapped Luger across the face, but then cowered behind Woman once Luger tried to retaliate. Ole Anderson tried a sneak attack, but Luger made quick work of him. Luger got his hands on Flair, tossing him around until the returning World Television Champion Arn Anderson used Woman's Shoe to bash the total package from behind. The Horsemen stomped on Luger until members of the locker room raced in for the save. Following pre-match promos, the Rock and Roll Express battled the Fabulous Freebirds in a 2 out of 3 falls match. The Rock and Roll took an early advantage and scored a quick pinfall victory after a double dropkick to Michael Hayes to win the first fall. In the second fall, the Freebirds shifted the momentum by using illegal double-team maneuvers to pummel Robert Gibson. Ricky Morton aided his partner and prepared for a double dropkick. Garvin held Hayes back, with the Rock and Roll crashing to the mat. Hayes spiked Morton with a DDT and picked up a pinfall to win the second fall. Morton battled back in the third fall and made the tag to Gibson, who came in like a house of fire. Hayes dodged a splash in the corner, with Gibson smashing his face on the top turnbuckle. The Freebirds pummeled Gibson until Morton got the tag and cleaned house. All four battled in the ring until Morton caught Hayes in the victory roll and scored a pinfall victory to win the bout 2-1. The Freebirds ambushed the Rock and Roll, using a belt to inflict damage and then hit a double DDT. A vignette aired, with Sting introducing his new right-hand man, RoboCop. They stood side by side, hyping the Capital Combat pay-per-view. The April 20th edition of the Power Hour saw Jim Cornette host the Louisville Slugger with his guests, Bam Bam Bigelow, and his manager, Sir Oliver Humperdinck. Bigelow said that he wasn't afraid of the mythical boogeyman, and he's coming for him. This was in reference to an upcoming bout against Abdullah the Butcher, with Humperdinck hyping the future confrontation. In the main event, Jim Cornette led the Midnight Express to the ring for a non-title match against the United States Tag Team Champions Flying Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink. The champions bounced the Midnights around the ring, with beautiful Bobby Eaton and Sweet Stan Lane retreating to the floor for advice from Cornette. Zink responded by punching Cornette in the face, knocking him off the ring apron. The Midnights gained the momentum with double-team maneuvers, with the fans cheering on Pillman and Zink. Pillman connected with a missile dropkick off the top rope to take out Lane, with Eaton breaking up a pinfall attempt. With the referee preoccupied with a brawl between Zink and Eaton, Cornette tossed the tennis racket to Lane. Pillman flew through the air with a high cross body, with Lane swatting him in mid-air with the racket. Lane scored the pinfall victory, with the Midnights picking up a big win. The April 22nd episode of the main event saw Jim Cornette lead the Midnight Express to the ring to face the Rock and Roll Express. Double-team maneuvers and fast tags gave the Midnights the early advantage. A fun moment saw Ricky Morton send beautiful Bobby Eaton bouncing against the ropes. As Eaton ran back, referee Nick Patrick avoided collision and leapfrogged over him. Morton caught Eaton with a dropkick and made the tag to a fresh Robert Gibson, who cleaned house. All four brawled in the ring, with the referee's attention on Morton and Sweet Stan Lane. Jim Cornette entered the ring and swung the tennis racket at Morton, who ducked, with Eaton getting clobbered. Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin interfered, spiking Gibson with a DDT. Eaton covered Gibson and picked up the victory for the Midnights. The April 29th edition of the main event saw the United States Tag Team Champions Flying Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink team with the Rock and Roll Express to face the Midnight Express and the Fabulous Freebirds. It was fast-paced and hard-fought, with Ricky Morton taking a beating due to double-team maneuvers. All 8 men brawled in the ring, with the referee losing complete control of the match. Jim Cornette interfered, bashing Zink across the back with a tennis racket to cause a disqualification. The brawling continued after the bell, with the Midnights and the Freebirds retreating. The May 4th episode of the Power Hour saw Jim Cornette interview the United States Champion, the Total Package Lex Luger, about his upcoming World Title Steel Cage match at Capital Combat. Luger said that things are different this time, since the steel cage is designed to prevent outside interference. He said that if he can't beat Ric Flair, he'll shake his hand and never challenge for the title again. The May 5th edition of NWA Pro featured footage from a recent bout on Worldwide Wrestling between the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and the United States Champion, the Total Package Lex Luger. The Andersons stood in one corner, with Sting cheering Luger on from an opposite corner. Luger outlasted Flair's best shots and soon locked him in his own finishing move, the Figure 4 leg lock. Shortly after, Luger superplexed Flair off the top rope and teased a torture rack. The Andersons interfered, with Luger fighting them off. Out of nowhere, the returning Barry Windham ambushed Sting on the floor, ramming him into a steel ring post. Windham attacked Luger, with a wounded Sting crawling into the ring to aid his friend, only to get pummeled by Flair. The 4 horsemen were in full force, attacking the injured leg of Sting and putting the boots to Luger. Lance Russell interviewed the 4 horsemen, who were confident heading into Capital Combat. They had harsh words for both Lex Luger and Sting, with Arn Anderson saying they'd steamroll over them and RoboCop. The May 11th episode of the Power Hour saw Jim Cornette interview the World Heavyweight Champion, Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Ole Anderson. Ole said that there was one more addition to the 4 horsemen, Sid Vicious, who was led to the ring by Woman. Sid was angry that RoboCop was referred to as the man of the future. He said he'd crush RoboCop like a tin can. Barry Windham and Arn Anderson joined the rest of the Horsemen, with Flair saying that Lex Luger can't match this. The May 12th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross interview the 4 Horsemen and Woman. They hyped Capital Combat, with Ole Anderson saying that they were going to take out Lex Luger, Sting, and RoboCop. Barry Windham said, "From now on, we rule professional wrestling." Arn Anderson said, "If you think R2-D2 and Sting on one leg and Luger can buck these odds, you are out of your noodle." Ric Flair said that they were going to break Sting's leg again. Capital Combat took place on May 19th, live on pay-per-view from Washington, D.C. The opening bout saw Kevin Sullivan, Cactus Jack, and Bam Bam Bigelow battle the Road Warriors and Norman. It was an all-out war, with all 6 beating the daylights out of each other. In the end, Hawk nailed Sullivan with a flying clothesline off the top rope and scored the pinfall victory. Teddy Long led Mean Mark Callis to the ring to face Johnny Ace in a hard-hitting encounter. Catalyst took Ace down with a heart punch, followed by an elbow drop off the top rope to pick up an impressive pinfall victory. The United States Tag Team Champions Flying Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink defended their titles against the Midnight Express. Per stipulation, Jim Cornette was locked in a shark cage at ringside. It was fast-paced from the start, with the champions getting the best of the Midnights to send them retreating to the floor. Beautiful Bobby Eaton dodged an attack, which sent Pillman tumbling to the floor. Eaton followed it up with a swinging neckbreaker on the floor. Sweet Stan Lane launched Pillman off the ring apron and crashing against a steel guardrail. Back in the ring, Eaton connected with a springboard backbreaker on Pillman. The assault on Pillman continued, with Eaton nailing a beautiful elbow drop off the top rope for a 2 count. Eaton launched off the top rope, landing on Pillman with an Alabama Jam, again only getting a 2 count. Pillman managed to tag in Zink, who soon fell victim to a rocket launcher. Zink barely kicked out, leading to all 4 men brawling in the ring. Lane connected with an enziguri to the back of Zink's head. Eaton rolled Zink up with an inside cradle and scored the pinfall victory. The Midnight Express were crowned the new United States Tag Team Champions. Sting made his entrance, with RoboCop trekking behind at a snail's pace. The Horsemen ambushed Sting at ringside and locked him inside the shark cage that was used in the previous bout. RoboCop ripped the door right off the shark cage, freeing Sting, with the Horsemen retreating. Tony Schiavone interviewed the debuting Junkyard Dog, only to be interrupted by Jim Cornette, who was angry that this interview time wasn't for the Midnight Express. Cornette asked JYD where he's been since he left the NWA, with JYD saying he's been at 845 Dewberry Street in Louisville, Kentucky. An irate Cornette exclaimed that that was the address of his mother. Cornette swung the tennis racket, with JYD blocking the shot and apprehending the weapon. JYD said that he didn't like recess and he's not here to play. The Steiner brothers defended the World Tag Team Championships against Doom in a hard-hitting bout between 2 powerhouse tag teams. Scott planted Ron Simmons with a Frankensteiner, while Rick put down Butch Reed with a Steiner line. Doom shifted the momentum, with Reed holding a prone Scott in the air and Simmons striking with a clothesline off the second rope. Rick broke up a pinfall attempt, with all 4 brawling and the referee losing control. Long distracted the referee, allowing Simmons to ambush Rick and allow Reed to fall on top of him off the second rope. The referee made the count, with Reed picking up the pinfall victory. Doom was crowned the new World Tag Team Champions. In the main event, Woman led the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, to the ring to face the United States Champion, the Total Package Lex Luger, in a steel cage match. This was the gigantic Thunderdome cage, which also covered ringside, snug up against the guardrails. Luger instructed referee Mike Atkins to check Woman for any weapons, with Flair repeatedly saying, "She's fine." As Atkins frisked Woman, he apprehended an international object and put it in his pocket before calling for the bell to start the bout. Luger was competing with an injured knee and was coming off of a staph infection, going against doctors' advice by wrestling. It didn't show, with Luger tossing Flair around with ease. Flair fought back, chopping at Luger and ramming him against the cage. He honed in on the injured right knee of Luger, but the total package fought through the pain. Flair attempted to get away from Luger by climbing the cage. Luger chased after him, pulling Flair down to the floor and ramming his head against a steel ring post, busting him wide open. Like a shark to blood, Luger attacked the cut of Flair, with the champion's face covered in a crimson mask. Luger superplexed Flair off the top rope, but hurt his knee upon landing. Flair pulverized the leg and locked in a figure 4. Luger writhed in pain, with Flair holding onto the ropes for more leverage behind the referee's back. The Andersons and Sid Vicious made their way down the ramp just as Luger shifted the momentum. Sting raced to the scene, attacking the Horsemen at ringside. Just as the Horsemen began to attack Sting, marching down the aisle came the debuting 7'7" El Gigante. The Giant shoved Ole aside, with the Horsemen retreating. Somehow, Ole had the cage raised enough for Barry Windham to sneak in, ambushing Luger, who'd had Flair in the torture rack. The referee called for a disqualification with a very anticlimactic finish. Flair tossed the referee aside as Anderson joined Windham in pummeling Luger in a vicious attack. As the cage began to raise, Sting raced in, chasing off the Horsemen. Tony Schiavone interviewed a bloody Flair in the aisle, who was ecstatic to still be the World Heavyweight Champion. Flair held the title up to the camera, saying, "This is it. This is the world title. There's only one, and it's mine." Sting attacked Luger, with Gigante walking up the aisle to cause the Horsemen to retreat. The May 25th episode of the Power Hour saw Paulie Dangerously make his return, announcing that he'd purchased the contract of Mean Mark Callis from Teddy Long. Dangerously proclaimed Callis as the next World Heavyweight Champion. In the main event, Flying Brian Pillman battled Bam Bam Bigelow, with the Beast from the East dominating the majority of the bout. Sir Oliver Humperdinck got involved, choking Pillman behind the referee's back. Pillman attempted a high crossbody off the top rope, with Bigelow catching him. Bigelow tossed Pillman over the top rope, causing a disqualification. Pillman launched off the top, striking Bigelow with a missile dropkick and punching him repeatedly on his tattooed head to end the show. The May 26th episode of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross tease that he had a big surprise. This angered the World Heavyweight Champion Nature Boy Ric Flair and Ole Anderson, who interrogated Ross. Flair and Ole also interrogated Rocky King, who also claimed to know what the surprise was. Out came the Junkyard Dog, with Flair and Ole attacking. JYD cleaned house and sent the Horsemen retreating. As Ole held Flair back, JYD said, "It ain't 1935 no more, this is 1990 and it's a new time." JYD said, "If you can't stand my heat, get the hell out of my kitchen." Jim Ross interviewed the debuting Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, who hyped his upcoming bout against the World Television Champion Arn Anderson. Orndorff denounced the lifestyle of the Four Horsemen and said that at the Clash of the Champions, he's going to take care of business. Jim Ross interviewed the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who announced that he'd be defending the World Heavyweight Championship against the Junkyard Dog at the Clash of the Champions. Flair said that JYD wouldn't go in the record books as the first black world champion, not at his expense. the Road Warriors cut a promo, with Animal issuing a challenge to the Four Horsemen to face them, instead of jumping them. Hawk said, "You know what's so very unique about being big like us? You can do whatever you want. That means that if I want to slap Ric Flair in the face, he's going to have to do something about it. But what can he do against this? Whoa, not much. Not much at all, because we are the LOD, the Legion of Doom, the creme de la creme. Whoa, what a rush. A rush for us, a bummer for you." The June 2nd episode of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross interview Stan the Lariat Hansen, who talked about wrestling in third world countries. Hansen said that he's been away from the American wrestling scene because he's not a yes man. With tobacco spewing from his mouth, he said that he's back to run roughshod on anyone he wants to. He whipped the bull rope around and hyped his brutal finishing maneuver, the Lariat. Jim Ross interviewed Horsemen members Arn Anderson, Barry Windham, and Sid Vicious. Anderson hyped he and Windham's upcoming encounter with the Road Warriors, who he said don't have the same fire in their eyes that they used to. He said that the Horsemen are stronger than ever and the elite in wrestling. The World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair walked in, saying that the Horsemen are going to put the Road Warriors in their place. In the main event, the Road Warriors battled Arn Anderson and Barry Windham, who had Sid Vicious in their corner. Sid provided a distraction, which allowed Anderson to trip up Animal, with Windham crashing on top. Anderson held down the legs of Animal, allowing Windham to make the cover, but only score a 2 count. Sid and Ole Anderson attacked the Road Warriors to cause a disqualification, with Sting, the Junkyard Dog, and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff racing in for the save. The June 9th episode of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Herd make an announcement. Herd said that due to the actions of the Four Horsemen at Capital Combat, they were being fined. Furthermore, Woman was suspended indefinitely. He said that Ole Anderson had originally begged him for a job, but if an investigation finds that he was involved in raising the steel cage, he'll be suspended indefinitely. Horsemen members Ole Anderson, Arn Anderson, and Sid Vicious responded, with Ole vehemently denying any involvement in the shenanigans at Capital Combat. As Barry Windham walked in, Arn voiced his disgust, saying that it's always been the Horsemen versus the world. Windham said that it was one of the idiots that Herd hired to run the cage, and he doesn't want to accept responsibility. Jim Ross interviewed Sting, Paul Orndorff, and the Junkyard Dog, who voiced their intention to stand up for WCW and battle the Four Horsemen. The Clash of the Champions 11, Coastal Crush, took place on June 13th and saw the debut of the Wild-Eyed Southern Boys, Steve Armstrong and Tracy Smothers. They put on an impressive performance, defeating the Fabulous Freebirds. A vignette aired, hyping the debut of Big Van Vader, with footage airing of his bouts in New Japan Pro Wrestling. The behemoth wore a giant headpiece resembling a mastodon and carried a cane with a skull on top. Flying Brian Pillman was in action against Mean Mark Callis, who had Paulie Dangerously in his corner. Dangerously distracted Pillman from the start, allowing Callis to ambush his opponent and gain an unfair advantage. Pillman was resilient, hitting Callis with a missile dropkick off the top rope, and then knocking Dangerously off the apron. Callis caught Pillman in midair, thwarting his high crossbody attempt. He dropped Pillman throat first onto the top rope, pinning him to score the pinfall victory. Jim Cornette led the United States Tag Team Champions, the Midnight Express, to the ring for a match against the Rock and Roll Express. It was action-packed from the get-go, showcasing tag team wrestling at its finest. The referee lost control, ordering a stop to the brawling to determine who the true legal men were. With the action reset, the Midnights capitalized with quick tags and illegal double-team maneuvers. The action again got out of control, with all four battling in the ring. Ricky Morton clotheslined beautiful Bobby Eaton over the top rope, while Robert Gibson attempted to apply a spinning toe hold on Sweet Stan Lane. Morton tossed Eaton off the ring apron and crashing against a steel guardrail. Lane used his legs to push Gibson away, crashing into Morton to knock him off the apron. Cornette distracted the referee, allowing Eaton to leap off the top rope with a double axe handle, smashing onto Gibson to break up his sleeper hold. Lane made the cover, with Gibson barely kicking out. All four waged war in the ring until the Rock and Roll connected with a double dropkick to Eaton. The referee made the count, with Lane preventing the official from making the 3. This caused the referee to call for a disqualification, with the Rock and Roll Express winning the match, but not the gold. Lex Luger defended the United States Championship against Sid Vicious, who had Ole Anderson in his corner. In mere seconds, Luger took out Ole and knocked down Sid with a clothesline to score the pinfall victory. World Television Champion Arn Anderson faced Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff in a non-title match. After a hard-fought battle, Orndorff reversed a small package and scored the pinfall victory. In the main event, the Nature Boy Ric Flair defended the World Heavyweight Championship against the Junkyard Dog. JYD pummeled the champion, taking Flair's best shots and dishing out punishment. Desperate, Ole Anderson distracted the referee, allowing Flair to bash JYD over the head with a steel chair. This didn't faze JYD, who tossed Flair around the ring, battering him with ease. Ole interfered to cause a disqualification, which brought out the rest of the Horsemen, who attacked JYD. Sting, Lex Luger, and Paul Orndorff raced in, fighting off the Horsemen and causing Flair to retreat. Jim Ross interviewed Sting, who challenged Flair to face him in a title match at the Great American Bash. Flair and the Horsemen returned to the ring, with the brawl reigniting. Sting battered Flair, tossing him around the ring to end the broadcast. The June 15th edition of the Power Hour saw Jim Ross interview Rocky King, who claimed to have a surprise for Ole Anderson. Disgruntled, Ole interrupted, with King introducing his surprise, Thunderbolt Patterson. Ole became furious at the sight of his old rival, stomping away. Patterson said that it's a new day, and he's going to keep an eye on Ole. He said, "The time has come for me to put that foot where the sun don't shine." Arn Anderson battled Rocky King, pulverizing him in a one-sided encounter. The Horsemen raced in to join in on a beatdown to cause a disqualification, with Sid powerbombing King. The Dudes with Attitudes, Sting, the Junkyard Dog, and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff raced in for the save, with the Horsemen retreating. Jim Cornette hosted the Louisville Slugger, introducing the Fabulous Freebirds. Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin said that it wasn't easy being the biggest band in rock and roll, saying they've been burning up Europe, and now they're going to take America by storm. Michael Hayes said that they were the best wrestling team and the best rock and roll act around. The Freebirds threw off Cornette by saying that they want the United States Tag Team titles and they're coming for the Midnight Express. Hayes threatened Cornette, saying that if they get a title shot, the Midnights and Cornette can do two things: nothing and like it. The June 16th episode of World Championship Wrestling featured a promo from Horsemen members Barry Windham, the World Television Champion Arn Anderson, and the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Anderson addressed Sting and Lex Luger and said, "In this sport, there's people that want things and there's people that have things, and the Horsemen have things." The Nature Boy said, "When your name is Ric Flair and you are a member of the Four Horsemen, you dictate policies." Flair said that nobody can book a title match without his name on the dotted line. The June 29th edition of the Power Hour saw Ric Flair and Ole Anderson hype the upcoming World Heavyweight Championship match against Sting at the Great American Bash. Flair said, "Be ready to take the steps. It's gut check time." He said, "You've got to prove to yourself, you've got to prove to the people worldwide that you are ready to be the man, ready to be the one and only World Heavyweight Champion." The June 30th edition of World Championship Wrestling featured a message from WCW President Jim Herd. Ole Anderson was on hand, with Herd announcing that at the Great American Bash, the Nature Boy Ric Flair would defend the World Heavyweight Championship against Sting. Surrounding the ring would be the Super Dudes, the Steiner Brothers, the Junkyard Dog, and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, who would make sure there wouldn't be any interference. Later in the show, Herd revealed another stipulation to Ole Anderson. In walked El Gigante, who Ole would be handcuffed to during the Flair and Sting match at the Great American Bash. Jim Ross interviewed the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Ole Anderson. Flair cut a promo on Sting, saying, "It would appear on the surface that you have everything going your way. Wrong." He continued, saying, "You still have to beat Ric Flair." Flair reminded Sting, "To be the man, you have to beat the man." Jim Ross interviewed Sting, who was backed by the Dudes with Attitudes. Sting was ecstatic that his title shot would be a fair one-on-one match. The July 1st episode of The Main Event saw Paulie Dangerously interview the Four Horsemen, with the World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair complaining about the NWA. Flair was upset with the board of directors for making him wait to learn what the stipulation would be for his match against Sting at the Great American Bash. He took off his shoe, holding it up and saying, "I pay $1,000 a pair for these. They're alligator. They're custom made. And you, boy, on the best day of your life, won't be able to wear these. Baltimore, Maryland has seen me wrestle every great athlete alive and come up victorious each time. Sting, jump on, baby." The July 7th episode of World Championship Wrestling saw Gordon Solie conduct a face-to-face interview with Sting and the World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Solie asked the challenger if he was 100%, with Sting saying he is. Flair screamed in Sting's face, so irate that Ole Anderson had to pull the champion away. Ole began to point his finger in Sting's chest, with the challenger getting impatient. Sting and Flair got in one another's face, with El Gigante making his presence known. Ole went quiet, in awe at the sight of Gigante. Flair went ballistic, angry that Sting would embarrass him. He looked into the camera and said, "1 hour from now, You will be mine. The Great American Bash took place on July 7th and saw the return of Harley Race, who competed against another former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Wildfire Tommy Rich. Race was brutal, hitting Rich with a pile driver in the middle of the ring, followed by a suplex on the entrance ramp. Rich battled back, nailing Race with a fist drop off the second rope. Race responded with a belly-to-belly suplex, followed by a thunderous clothesline. Both men tumbled over the top rope and to the floor, where they continued brawling. Back in the ring, Rich hit a high crossbody off the top rope. Race rolled through it, hooking the leg and picking up a pinfall victory. Jim Cornette led the Midnight Express to the ring to defend the United States Tag Team Championships against the Wild-Eyed Southern Boys. A brawl erupted at the bell, with both teams brawling to the floor. Back in the ring, the Southern Boys tossed around the champions with ease. Steve Armstrong hit Beautiful Bobby Eaton with a beautiful flying clothesline off the top rope. Things didn't fare much better for Eaton, falling victim to a double arm wringer and double chop to the chest. Sweet Stan Lane tagged in, showing off his martial arts skills, until Tracy Smothers battled back with chops and kicks of his own. Even Eaton got knocked down by the wild kicks of Smothers, with the champions retreating to the floor to regroup. Back in the ring, Lane raked the eyes of Smothers and made a quick tag to Eaton, who was quickly locked in an armbar from Smothers. A sucker punch by Lane led to a beatdown on Smothers at the hands of the champions. The crafty Smothers rolled away to safety and made the tag to Armstrong, who nailed a high crossbody off the top rope to take out the champions. Both Armstrong and Smothers made the cover, with the champions barely kicking out. Lane and Eaton then had their heads rammed together, with Cornette screaming at them to clean up their act. Lane got his hands on Smothers, tossing him to the floor and then viciously whipping him against a steel guardrail. Cornette clobbered Smothers in the face with a tennis racket to add insult to injury. Smothers crawled up to the apron, with Lane knocking him off and crashing against another guardrail. Lane executed an atomic drop, with Eaton following it up with a backbreaker. Quick tags followed, with Smothers taking a beating. Eaton leapt off the top rope, landing on Smothers with an Alabama jam. Lane struck Smothers with a kick to the side of the head, with Eaton then hitting a swinging neckbreaker right afterward. The champions made more quick tags, with commentator Jim Ross saying that they were a well-oiled machine. Smothers showed signs of life, slingshotting Eaton over the top rope and crashing to the floor. Lane cut him off, preventing him from making the tag. The Midnights attempted a double-team maneuver, with Smothers taking them both down with a sunset flip and then making the tag to Armstrong. Full of energy, Armstrong tossed the champions around the ring, with pandemonium ensuing. Smothers held Lane up, with Armstrong connecting with a dropkick off the top rope. The referee was preoccupied, stalling to make the count, which Lane kicked out of. Eaton shoved Armstrong off the top rope, allowing the Midnights to connect with the rocket launcher. Armstrong barely kicked out. Both the Midnights and Cornette argued with the referee, claiming he was counting too slow. This allowed Smothers to trade places with Armstrong and roll up Eaton with an inside cradle for a 2 count. Eaton whipped Smothers against the ropes, with Lane connecting with a kick to the back of the head. Eaton rolled up Smothers and scored the pinfall victory. Cornette celebrated with the Midnights, calling them the best in the world after an excellent bout. Big Van Vader made his debut wearing his massive Mastodon helmet during his entrance, with pyro lighting behind him. Taking off the monstrosity, Vader performed a ceremony with smoke shooting from the Mastodon helmet. Vader proceeded to pulverize his opponent, the Z-Man Tom Zink. After a brutal beatdown, Vader crushed Zink with a big splash and scored the pinfall victory. Lex Luger defended the United States Championship against Mean Mark Callis, who had Paulie dangerously in his corner. It was a hard-hitting battle between two powerhouses. Luger managed to hoist the massive Callis up in a torture rack. The long legs of Callis swung and knocked out the referee, causing Paul E. to race in and smash his cell phone over the ribs of Luger. Callis crawled on top of the champion for a pinfall attempt, with Luger kicking out with authority. With the champion set up on the ropes, Callis went in for a heart punch, but Luger kicked him square in the face. After knocking Paul E. off the apron with a right hand, Luger took down Callis with a lariat and scored the pinfall victory. Theodore R. Long led Doom to the ring to defend the World Tag Team Championships against the Rock and Roll Express. Doom used their power advantage to wear down the challengers, with Teddy Long getting in a cheap shot on Ricky Morton behind the referee's back. A fresh Robert Gibson tagged in, cleaning house, with things quickly breaking down and the referee losing control. Gibson took down Reed with an enziguri to knock him off the apron. Just as Gibson's attention was focused on Long, Reed connected with a flying shoulder tackle off the top rope. This was enough for Reed to score the pinfall victory, with Doom retaining their titles. In the main event, the Nature Boy Ric Flair defended the World Heavyweight Championship against Sting. Jim Herd forced Ole Anderson to be cuffed to El Gigante. The Dudes with Attitude surrounded the ring to make sure a fair match transpired. Sting shook off Flair's chops and Gorilla Press slammed him to the mat. A hip toss followed, with a dropkick afterward to send Flair onto the entrance ramp. Flair chopped at the chest of Sting, who barely flinched, and sent the champion soaring back into the ring. The champion gained the advantage by sticking his thumb in the eye of Sting. A snapmare followed, with Flair hitting Sting with a knee drop to the face. Flair suplexed Sting to the canvas, with the challenger beating the champion to his feet. Sting nailed a high crossbody off the top rope for a 2 count, with Flair begging for the challenger to back off. Flair attempted a figure 4, with Sting kicking him away. Sting attempted a test of strength, with Flair taking a cheap shot and knocking the challenger to the mat with a thunderous chop. Flair attacked the previously injured knee of Sting, who still fought back valiantly. After dodging a knee drop, Sting locked Flair in a figure 4 in the middle of the ring, with the champion screaming in pain. Flair took the fight to the floor, chopping the chest of Sting and Irish whipping him against a steel guardrail. Sting showed no pain, chasing the champion back into the ring. Flair climbed to the top rope, with Sting slamming him to the mat. After kicking out of a backslide, Flair kicked the knee of Sting, causing him to crash to the canvas. After taking one too many chops, Sting fought back, press slamming Flair to the mat and coming close to scoring a pinfall. Sting Irish whipped Flair into the corner, with Flair flopping onto the apron, soon struck with a big clothesline, courtesy of the Stinger. The challenger Irish whipped Flair into the corner and hit a Stinger splash, with the champion flopping to the mat. Sting locked in the Scorpion Deathlock, causing the remaining horsemen to race to the ring. The Dudes with Attitudes formed a human shield, stopping the Horsemen in their tracks. As a brawl engaged on the ramp, Flair made it to the ropes to break the submission. The champion attempted to pin the challenger, hooking his feet on the ropes for leverage. Scott Steiner shoved Flair's feet off the ropes to break the pin. Sting rolled up Flair, who barely kicked out. A backslide followed, with Flair again barely kicking out. Sting attempted a high knee into the corner, with Flair moving and the challenger hurting his already wounded knee. Flair attempted to capitalize, prepping Sting for a figure 4. Sting rolled Flair up with an inside cradle, scoring a pinfall victory to become the new NWA World Heavyweight Champion. A passionate Jim Ross screamed in excitement, saying, "Sting has upset Ric Flair to win the Heavyweight Championship of the world. The Stinger has done it." The crowd roared in excitement, with fireworks bursting over the ring as the Dudes with Attitudes celebrated with the new world champion. As Sting walked up the ramp, a giant head in his image began to light with sparklers shooting around it. Gordon Solie congratulated Sting, who called Flair the greatest world champion of all time. Sting said that he had big shoes to fill and said he'd do the best that he can do. The July 8th edition of the main event saw Arn Anderson defend the World Television Championship against Flyin' Brian Pillman. With the crowd rallied behind him, Pillman took Anderson to his limit, executing various high-risk maneuvers. After hitting a dive to the floor onto Anderson, Pillman locked the champion in a sleeper hold in the middle of the ring. Anderson countered with a chin breaker, locking in a sleeper hold of his own. Pillman countered with a chin breaker of his own and took down Anderson with a dropkick, followed by a suplex, capping it off with a big splash for a 2 count. Leaping off the top rope, Pillman nailed a high cross body onto the champion. Anderson rolled through, hooking the tights of Pillman to score the pinfall victory to retain his title. The July 14th episode of World Championship Wrestling featured backstage footage from the Great American Bash, with Gordon Solie interviewing the new World Heavyweight Champion, Sting. Just as Sting said that he had big shoes to fill, the Dudes with Attitudes began to spray multiple bottles of champagne in celebration. In the main event, Wildfire Tommy Rich battled Stan Hansen in a hard-hitting bout from the bell. Rich was resilient, fighting through the clubbing shots from Hansen. Sensing defeat, Hansen tossed Rich over the top rope, purposely causing a disqualification. Irate, Hansen took down referee Randy Anderson with a stiff lariat. Hansen then clobbered Rich upside the head with a metal cowbell before marching away. Jim Ross interviewed senior official Nick Patrick, who said that Hansen was suspended for 30 days and fined $5,000. Hansen was furious, screaming in Patrick's face and saying that he'd be back no matter what. The July 21st edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Bob Caudle interview Captain Mike Rotunda, who had some news about Norman. Rotunda said that Norman's father had died, and it's had a major effect on him. He said that Norman was now dressing like a trucker, honoring his father in his past profession. Rotunda said that Norman could really use a friend right now. Jim Ross interviewed the World Heavyweight Champion Sting, who talked about the changes in his life since he's won the title. He said, "I'm just still the Stinger. There's nothing different about me." The Nature Boy Ric Flair cut a promo backstage, saying that he's not at a crossroads, Sting is. Flair said that Sting has the burden of being the man that took the World Heavyweight Championship away from the Four Horsemen. He said that the Horsemen have nothing to lose, and they're going to hurt Sting and get the title back. The July 28th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross interview the World Television Champion Arn Anderson. Ross presented Anderson with a letter that was addressed to the Four Horsemen. Inside was a picture, which Ross showed to Anderson, asking him if the name Dustin means anything to him. Anderson didn't know who that was, and instead cut a scathing promo on Sting. He said that Sting's life would never be the same once Sid Vicious got a hold of him. Jim Ross interviewed the Junkyard Dog and the World Heavyweight Champion Sting, only to be interrupted by Wildfire Tommy Rich, who broke the news that Lex Luger had been attacked. With his clothes torn, a furious Luger made his way to the ring, with Sting attempting to calm him down. The August 4th episode of World Championship Wrestling saw the mysterious masked man known as the Pearl in action against Joe Kazana. On commentary, both Jim Ross and Bob Caudle were impressed by the skills of the unknown Pearl. In the end, the Pearl was victorious with a moonsault off the top rope. The August 11th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross interview the World Heavyweight Champion Sting and the United States Champion Lex Luger. Sting pointed fingers at the Four Horsemen for attacking Luger, who broke his silence. Luger said that just like the Horsemen, he and Sting can jump people too. He told the Horsemen to watch their backs. The August 18th episode of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Cornette lead the Midnight Express to the ring to defend the United States Tag Team Championships against Flyin' Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink. Pillman and Zink set the tone, battering the champions with ease. Stan Lane shifted the momentum, whipping Pillman against a steel guardrail on the floor behind the referee's back. Cornette added insult to injury, smashing Pillman's ribs with the tennis racket. This led to quick tags between the champions, putting a beatdown on Pillman. Cornette continued to interfere, attacking the throat of Pillman behind the referee's back. Beautiful Bobby Eaton climbed to the top rope, with Pillman thwarting his attempt, body slamming Eaton to the canvas. Pillman made the tag to Zink, who pummeled both Lane and Eaton. Zink hoisted Eaton in the air, with Pillman connecting with a standing dropkick. Just as Zink locked Eaton in a sleeper hold, he was ambushed by Sid Vicious, who caused a disqualification. Sid took out Lane inadvertently, making Cornette furious. Grabbing Cornette by the throat, Sid shoved him to the mat. Eaton began trading punches with Sid, with the show cutting to a commercial. The August 19th edition of the main event saw Paulie Dangerously host the Danger Zone. His guests were the Nature Boy Ric Flair and the World Heavyweight Champion Sting, who talked trash about an eventual rematch. As things got heated, the rest of the Four Horsemen backed Flair, with Sting retreating. Flair said, "You'd better learn the facts of life. We're the Horsemen. We call the shots. And whether you like it or you don't like it, learn to love it. Sting and dudes with attitudes, because we're all there is." World Television Champion Arn Anderson battled the United States Champion, the Total Package Lex Luger. Just when Luger got Anderson up in a torture rack, Ric Flair and Sid Vicious ran in to cause a disqualification. Sting and the Junkyard Dog ran to Luger's aid, brawling with the Horsemen. Flair and the Horsemen retreated, with the Dudes with Attitudes left standing tall. The August 24th episode of the Power Hour saw Jim Cornette host the Louisville Slugger, with his guest being the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Cornette asked Flair if he or the Four Horsemen had anything to do with the mysterious Black Scorpion. Flair denied any involvement, saying that the Horsemen don't conceal anything. He then said that the reason he's not getting the world title shot against Sting is because of the powers that be and the Turner Organization. Flair said that he's going to step over Lex Luger to get to Sting and the World Heavyweight Championship. The August 25th episode of World Championship Wrestling featured a vignette from a dark room. A mysterious voice boomed from a shadow, saying they had a message to deliver to Sting. In a menacing tone, the voice said, "Sting, I'm going to destroy you." He then said that his identity is someone from Sting's past, but said, "Even if you saw my name in light, you wouldn't recognize me." The voice mentioned California in '86. He teased that he'd be at the next Clash of the Champions, waiting. Jim Ross interviewed the Horsemen, with the Nature Boy Ric Flair hyping his upcoming bout at the Clash of the Champions against the United States Champion Lex Luger. Flair said, "If I have to beat you to get to Sting, mark my words, turn the TV on because the people around the world will see the greatest wrestler of all time come back full cycle, starting with Lex Luger, September 5th. Woo!" The August 26th edition of the main event saw the Rock and Roll Express in action against the Midnight Express, with Jim Cornette in their corner. Cornette tried to get involved until Robert Gibson punched him between the eyes. All four men battled it out until Ricky Morton caught Sweet Stan Lane with a sunset flip to pick up a pinfall victory. The August 31st edition of the Power Hour saw Gordon Solie interview the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who referred to himself as the Measuring Stick. He said, when Ric Flair says he's gonna do something, it gets done. Flair hyped his upcoming match against Lex Luger at the Clash of the Champions, oozing confidence to close the interview. The September 1st edition of World Championship Wrestling featured a message from the Black Scorpion, who told Sting that he should be scared. The Scorpion hyped his upcoming encounter with the World Heavyweight Champion at the Clash of the Champions. He said that if Sting can beat him, he'll reveal his true identity. A vignette aired to hype the debut of the Master Blasters, merely showing two pairs of legs walking across a construction site. Jim Ross interviewed the World Heavyweight Champion Sting, who said that he had no idea who the Black Scorpion was, nor did he know how to prepare for a match like this. Despite the unknown, Sting wasn't afraid, and said that he wasn't going to let anybody down at the Clash of the Champions. The Clash of the Champions, Mountain Madness, took place on September 5th, and featured the Bad Street USA music video with Michael P.S. Hayes as the lead singer. Tony Schiavone interviewed the Fabulous Freebirds, who were in full force with Buddy Jack Roberts. Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin voiced his disgust over their loss against the Southern Boys earlier in the evening. Roberts said that the Southern Boys won the battle, but they're going to win the war. Hayes said that they are still taking names and raising Cain. Another vignette aired with Hayes and Garvin dancing their way around Hollywood, getting hounded by fans as they entered their white limo. The Master Blasters, Iron and Steel, made their debut, a pair of monsters with one being the man, who would go on to be known as Kevin Nash. Their opponents were the Candyman Brad Armstrong and White Lightning Tim Horner. Steele, or Nash, scored the pinfall victory on Horner to cap off an impressive showing. Tony Schiavone revealed a new concept in WCW called Running the Gauntlet. The objective was to win 3 consecutive bouts on 3 consecutive days, the Power Hour on Friday, World Championship Wrestling on Saturday, and the main event on Sunday. If successful, the wrestler would win $15,000. However, if unsuccessful, the opponents would divide the prize money. The first man to agree to run the gauntlet was Flying Brian Pillman. The Nasty Boys, Brian Knobbs and Jerry Saggs, made their debut, facing the team of Jackie Fulton and Terry Taylor. Showing brute force, the Nasty Boys had an impressive showing, with Saggs hitting a vicious flying elbow drop off the top rope onto Fulton to score the pinfall victory. After announcing the top 10 rankings, Tony Schiavone interviewed Stan the Lariat Hansen. With tobacco juice dripping out of his mouth, Hansen voiced his disgust for being ranked 6th. Hansen said that he was coming after everybody in his way. The Total Package Lex Luger defended the United States Championship against the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Despite chopping the champion, Flair was tossed around by Luger with ease. Luger clotheslined Flair over the top rope and to the floor, where the Total Package connected with another clothesline to send Flair crashing onto the concrete. Back in the ring, Luger connected with a Gorilla Press Slam, but Flair rolled out of the way of an elbow drop. Still, Luger sent Flair crashing to the mat with a clothesline, with the Nature Boy claiming that he injured his left shoulder. It was a swerve, with Flair punching Luger across the jaw and tossing him to the floor. Flair Irish whipped Luger against a steel guardrail for good measure. Back in the ring, Flair attacked the legs of Luger, with the Total Package battling back and slamming the Nature Boy off the top rope. Luger press slammed Flair once again, followed by a power slam. The Total Package connected with a beautiful superplex off the top rope, with Flair barely breaking out of a pinfall attempt. Flair charged at Luger, with the two tumbling over the top rope and to the floor. Suddenly, Stan Hansen attacked Luger to cause a disqualification. Hansen pummeled Luger and began to choke him with his bull rope. In the main event, Sting defended the World Heavyweight Championship against the mysterious Black Scorpion. The bell rang, with the two battering one another back and forth. On commentary, both Jim Ross and Bob Caudle looked for clues to reveal the identity of the Scorpion, to no avail. Out of nowhere, Sting connected with a Stinger Splash, pinning the Scorpion to pick up the victory. Sting tore the mask off the Scorpion, who wore a red mask underneath. As Sting fought with the Scorpion, a second Black Scorpion appeared on the ramp. Sting looked on at the second Scorpion, astonished. Referee Nick Patrick held back the champion, who wanted to keep fighting. Jim Ross interviewed Sting, who wanted to know why the Black Scorpion can't face him man to man. Sid Vicious interrupted, saying that he wants the World Heavyweight Championship. Sting said that he's focusing on the Black Scorpion right now. Insulted, Sid attacked Sting, pummeling him before proclaiming himself the next world champion. The September 8th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw the Black Scorpion in a dark room, making a present for Sting. He said that everybody wants to take from the champion, but he wants to give. The Scorpion gave another clue to his identity, saying, Los Angeles, 86, on the beach. He said, "I hope that you are slowly losing your mind." The Scorpion said, "Sid wants your belt. I want your life." A vignette aired from a junkyard with the Master Blasters flipping over a car. The September 15th episode of World Championship Wrestling featured footage of Gary Michael Capetta interviewing Nature Boy Ric Flair from a locker room. Backed by Doom, Teddy Long got in Flair's face, claiming it was their locker room. As Butch Reed talked trash, Arn Anderson stepped in to defend Flair, resulting in a war of words. The Black Scorpion delivered another message, saying that he was going to destroy the World Heavyweight Champion, Sting. He said that a long time has passed since Sting saw him, and even if seen in the light, he's unrecognizable. The Scorpion said that soon, Sting was going to be terrified. He said, "Who could it be that would hate you enough to want to see you a broken and defeated man?" Jim Ross interviewed Sting, who had no idea who the Black Scorpion was. The September 21st episode of the Power Hour saw Jim Cornette host the Louisville Slugger, joined by his guest, Stan the Lariat Hansen. With tobacco spewing from his mouth, Hansen called Lex Luger a prima donna and said he hates everything the total package stands for. Hyping their upcoming encounter at Halloween Havoc, Hansen said that Luger is going to wish he were trick-or-treating. Hansen said that once he's done with Luger, he's coming for Sting to take what's his, claiming he's always been number one. Scott Steiner began running the gauntlet, with his first opponent being beautiful Bobby Eaton, who had Jim Cornette in his corner. Cornette got involved, aiding Eaton in gaining the advantage. Rick Steiner came to ringside to even the odds. Scott persevered, hitting Eaton with a Tiger Bomb, followed by a big backdrop. Sweet Stan Lane interfered, tripping up Scott, who pulled Lane up onto the apron. Eaton charged, accidentally colliding with Lane and knocking him off the apron. Scott rolled up Eaton, who barely kicked out. A Frankensteiner soon followed, with Scott scoring the pinfall victory. The September 22nd episode of NWA Pro saw Flyin' Brian Pillman and the Z-Man Tom Zink battle the Nature Boy Ric Flair and the World Television Champion Arn Anderson. The Horsemen had their hands full, with Pillman locking Flair in a figure 4 leg lock. Arn Anderson broke things up and kicked Pillman upside the head. Still, Pillman stood up to Flair in a chop fest, winning the exchange and Irish whipping the Nature Boy across the ring. They battled to the floor, where Flair lured Pillman into a clothesline via a waiting Anderson. Flair proceeded to drop Pillman throat first onto a steel guardrail. Somehow Zink tagged in, but soon got DDT'd by Anderson head first onto the concrete floor. Doom raced in, brawling with Anderson and Flair in a wild scene. The September 22nd edition of World Championship Wrestling saw the Black Scorpion continue to taunt Sting by delivering another chilling video message. He said that Sting is losing his confidence and his mind. The Scorpion reminded Sting that before he faces Sid at Halloween Havoc, the two of them have one more showdown. Jim Ross interviewed the World Heavyweight Champion Sting, who admitted that the Black Scorpion was getting to him. Sting said that some way he will find out the true identity of the Scorpion. Suddenly, the Black Scorpion appeared in the crowd, with Sting charging up the aisle and through the curtain. In a backstage interview, the Fabulous Freebirds introduced their new manager, Little Richard Marley. The Nature Boy Ric Flair was in action against Scott Steiner, who was competing in Match 2 of the $15,000 gauntlet. Scott took the fight to Flair, pummeling him in the early minutes. Rick Steiner got in a cheap shot behind the referee's back, with Flair taking his famous face bump onto the floor. Scott followed to the floor, further pounding on the Nature Boy. Back in the ring, Flair gained the advantage and hit a knee drop onto the face of Scott. The advantage wouldn't last long, with Scott setting Flair up for a superplex. Arn Anderson attempted to interfere, only for Rick to fight him off. As the referee held back Rick, Arn bashed Scott across the back of the head. Flair made the cover, with Scott barely kicking out. Scott battled back, taking down Flair with a Steiner line. Just as Scott attempted a Frankensteiner, Anderson pulled Flair away, with Steiner crashing to the mat. Rick chased after Anderson, with the referee holding him back. This allowed Anderson to roll into the ring and plant Scott with a DDT. The referee ordered Anderson to leave ringside, allowing Rick to strike Flair with a Steiner line. This allowed Scott to pick up a pinfall victory over Flair, with the crowd going wild. Jim Ross interviewed the World Heavyweight Champion Sting, who said that he was obsessed with finding out who the Black Scorpion is. The September 23rd episode of the main event saw Scott Steiner compete in the final match of the Gauntlet, facing the World Television Champion Arn Anderson. Double A rolled up Steiner, holding onto the ropes for leverage. The referee counted 3, but let the match continue after seeing Anderson's act. Steiner power slammed Anderson and made the cover, with Flair pulling the referee out of the ring before he could make the 3 count. The referee called for the bell, with Scott winning the match and the $15,000 prize. Beautiful Bobby Eaton began running the gauntlet, with his first opponent being Tracy Smothers. A great back-and-forth encounter ensued, with the top rope breaking during the match. Still, Smothers climbed to the top, only for Cornette to shake the ropes and send Smothers crashing to the canvas. Eaton made the cover, hooking the tights and picking up a pinfall victory. The September 29th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw the Black Scorpion deliver another message. He said that he had another clue for Sting, the Scorpion Deathlock. The Scorpion said, "Sting, get ready, I'm not done with you yet." Beautiful Bobby Eaton continued running the gauntlet with his second match of the weekend, facing Ricky Morton. The crowd rallied behind Morton, who outmaneuvered Eaton in the early minutes. With the fight spilling into the crowd, Morton hip-tossed Eaton onto the concrete floor. Back in the ring, Eaton gained the advantage by ramming Morton's face onto the top turnbuckle. With the referee distracted, Jim Cornette bashed Morton repeatedly in the throat with the tennis racket. Eaton did everything he could to end the match, but Morton persevered, kicking out of every pinfall attempt. The clock ticked down, with Morton nearly scoring a pinfall victory, if not for the time limit expiring. This resulted in a 5-minute sudden death period, with Eaton desperate for a win. With the referee distracted, Cornette swung the tennis racket at Morton, who ducked, with Eaton bashed across the head. Morton connected with a high cross body, but Cornette physically restrained the referee from making a count. Sweet Stan Lane provided a distraction, allowing Eaton to connect with a flying knee to the back of Morton. Eaton picked up a pinfall victory, advancing in the gauntlet. We got another message from the Black Scorpion, who said that he was coming for Sting's life. Jim Ross interviewed the World Heavyweight Champion Sting, only to be interrupted by Sid Vicious. Officials stood between the two, with Sting saying that they didn't have to wait until Halloween Havoc. The Black Scorpion snuck into the ring, fending off an attempted save from Flying Brian Pillman. Sting turned around in time, with the Scorpion retreating. The Juicer made his debut, accompanied by a line of kids with their faces all painted like Beetlejuice. Art Barr portrayed the Tim Burton-inspired gimmick, throwing a cloud of powder at the start of the bout. While the gimmick was bizarre, the Juicer put on an exciting performance, rallying up the fans. The October 6th episode of World Championship Wrestling saw a blindfolded Gordon Solie enter the mysterious lair of the Black Scorpion. Solie questioned why he had to wear the blindfold, with the Scorpion saying that it was to protect his identity. The Scorpion said that he wants Sting to be driven mad and told Solie to ask the champion about Tulsa. Footage aired of the contract signing between the World Heavyweight Champion Sting and Sid Vicious. They stood across from one another at a table set up in the ring, with Tony Schiavone moderating the endeavor. After signing the contract, Sid said that he rules the world. Sting got a hold of the contract, wasting no time in signing it. Later that evening, Sid interrupted Sting's match, smashing him with a chair to cause a disqualification. Sid followed it up by powerbombing the champion. Footage was shown of the contract signing for a match between the Steiner brothers and the Nasty Boys. The signing took place at the UIC Pavilion in Chicago, with Tony Schiavone moderating the proceedings. After signing the papers, the champions were attacked with their own United States Tag Team Championships, wielded by the Nasties. Rick Steiner was tossed over the top rope, while Brian Knobbs power-slammed Scott through the table. Footage aired of the World Tag Team Champions, Doom, attacking Arn Anderson after winning his enhancement match. Jim Ross interviewed Arn Anderson and the Nature Boy Ric Flair, hyping their upcoming encounter with Doom. Anderson said, "They want to play a dirty game. We're the dirtiest players in the game." He said, "Don't think this is going to go uncontested or unbridled." The October 13th episode of the main event saw the Nature Boy Ric Flair and Arn Anderson face the Rock and Roll Express. Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson dominated the early goings, hitting stereo enziguris and locking in dueling figure 4 leg locks. Anderson inched towards Morton, raking his eyes to free Flair and caused Gibson to break his hold. This led to Flair and Anderson pounding on Morton, even taking the fight to the floor. Morton managed to tag in Gibson, leading to Flair eating a double dropkick. The referee attempted to maintain order, backing Gibson into his corner, while Morton rolled up Flair for a pinfall attempt. Anderson spiked Morton with a DDT, allowing Flair to pick up the pinfall victory. The October 13th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw the Steiner brothers defend the United States Tag Team Championships against the Midnight Express, who were accompanied by Jim Cornette. Beautiful Bobby Eaton was bounced around the ring with ease by the Steiners, even seeing Rick Bulldog Eaton off the shoulders of Brother Scott. Soon after, Scott manhandled both Eaton and Sweet Stan Lane with multiple body slams. Scott then took both Midnights down with a double Steiner line. Double team maneuvers allowed the Midnights to shift the momentum. With the referee distracted, Cornette jammed his tennis racket into the ribs of Rick on the floor. Still, an injured Rick tagged in Scott, who tossed around the challengers with ease. Lane took out Rick on the floor, distracting Scott and allowing Eaton to strike with a vicious clothesline. Scott battled back and took down Eaton with a Tiger Bomb, tagging Rick in soon after. All four brawled with the referee losing control. This allowed Cornette to waffle Rick over the head with the tennis racket. Eaton made the cover, with Rick barely kicking out. In pure desperation, Rick lifted Eaton in the air, allowing Scott to connect with a Steiner line. Rick covered Eaton and scored the pinfall victory to retain the titles. The October 26th episode of the Power Hour saw Jim Cornette host the Louisville Slugger, joined by his guests, the Nasty Boys. Hyping their upcoming match against the United States Tag Team Champions at Halloween Havoc, the Nasties predicted a harsh fate for the Steiners. The October 27th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross introduce the editor of the Wrestling Wrap-Up, Dennis Brent. He presented an award of recognition to the Southern Boys for their recent success and charitable work. An irate Jim Cornette interrupted, saying that his ceremony was set up to make he and the Midnight Express look like jerks. Cornette insulted the families of both Brad Armstrong and Tracy Smothers. Cocky, Cornette said that Armstrong wouldn't hit a man with glasses. Armstrong agreed, instead shoving Cornette on the backside. Halloween Havoc took place on October 27th and began with Ricky Morton wishing his partner Robert Gibson well, who was out with an injury. Because of this, Morton teamed with Wildfire Tommy Rich to face the Midnight Express, who had Jim Cornette in their corner. Morton took a beating, even getting crushed by the rocket launcher on the entrance ramp. Cornette interfered, bashing Morton with a tennis racket behind the referee's back. Beautiful Bobby Eaton leaped off the top rope, connecting with an Alabama Jam onto Morton. The Midnights attempted a second rocket launcher, with Morton lifting his knees up to provide a harsh landing for Eaton. Morton tagged in Rich, who took down both Midnights with ease. Cornette waffled Rich across the back with the tennis racket, but Sweet Stan Lane was too distracted to make a pinfall. At ringside stood the Southern Boys, who were dressed like Cornette, mocking him. While the Southern Boys attacked Cornette with tennis rackets, Rich used Cornette's racket to bash Lane over the head. This allowed Rich to score the pinfall victory, winning the bout for he and Morton. Dressed like the Phantom of the Opera, Tony Schiavone interviewed the World Heavyweight Champion, Sting. The Black Scorpion appeared, dragging a female crew member by the arm into a large box. As Sting broke through the pack of officials, he ripped the blanket off the box. As Pyro shot off, the Scorpion magically appeared behind Sting. The Scorpion pushed his hostage off the stage, landing into the waiting arms of Sting. While the hostage was safe, the Black Scorpion made his escape. The Steiner brothers defended the United States Tag Team Championships against the Nasty Boys in a wild brawl from the start. Both teams battled on the floor, with Jerry Saggs Irish whipping Scott Steiner against a steel guardrail and then smashed him across the back of the head with a chair. Back in the ring, Scott hit Saggs with a huge belly-to-belly suplex off the top rope. Soon after, Scott hit a Tiger Bomb, bringing the fans to their feet. Scott lifted Saggs up on his shoulders, with Rick nailing him with a bulldog off the top rope. Brian Knobbs smashed Scott over the back of the head with a steel chair behind the referee's back. Knobbs made the cover, with Scott barely kicking out. Scott suffered a beatdown at the hands of the Nasties, with Rick making the save by leveling Knobs with a Steiner line. With the referee distracted, the Nasties drilled Scott with a spike pile driver. Rick retaliated by bashing Sags across the back of the head with a steel chair. With blood pouring down his face, Sags locked Scott in a Boston Crab in the middle of the ring. Scott powered out, flipping Sags head over heels. Moments later, Scott made the tag to Rick, who pulverized both Knobs and Sags. All four men began brawling, with Rick nailing a double Steiner line off the top rope to take out both Nasties. On the floor, the Nasties body slammed Scott onto the concrete. Back in the ring, Rick took down Knobs with a Steiner line. Scott hit Knobs with a Frankensteiner and scored the pinfall victory, with the fans erupting in excitement. The Nasties attacked the champions with their own belts after the bell. Tony Schiavone attempted to interview the Steiners, with the Nasties again ambushing them. Theodore R. Long led Doom to the ring to defend the World Tag Team Championships against the Nature Boy Ric Flair and the World Television Champion Arn Anderson. Flair got his hands on Long, who responded by slapping him across the face. A hard-hitting back-and-forth encounter ensued, with both teams ultimately battling to a double countout. Stan the Lariat Hansen cut a promo backstage, holding a pumpkin in his hand. He said that the pumpkin reminded him of Lex Luger, spitting tobacco on it. Hansen hyped his upcoming encounter, saying he's taking the United States Championship back to Texas. Lex Luger defended the United States Championship against Stan Hansen, ending in controversial fashion. Just as Hansen shoved the referee aside, Luger struck his challenger with a clothesline. Danger Stan Spivey interrupted, handing Hansen the cowbell and bull rope. Hansen charged, with Luger hitting a backdrop, followed by a bulldog. Luger ran towards Hansen, who retaliated by striking with a big lariat. The referee awoke to make the count, with Hansen scoring the pinfall victory to become the new United States Champion. In the main event, Sting defended the World Heavyweight Championship against Sid Vicious. Sid was ruthless, battling the champion all the way onto the ramp. Sting raced back to the ring, leaping over the top rope and crashing into Sid. Sting suddenly raced into the crowd just as the Horsemen made their way to ringside. In a controversial moment, Sting attempted a body slam with his legs giving out and Sid landing on top of him for a 3 count. Fireworks exploded as Sid held the World Heavyweight Championship over his head. But it was a setup, and the real Sting emerged from the crowd. It was revealed that the imposter Sting was Barry Windham, with the match continuing. Sting hit Sid with a Stinger Splash and scored the pinfall victory to retain the World Heavyweight Championship. The November 3rd edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross interview both the Nature Boy Ric Flair and Teddy Long. Flair issued a challenge. He and Arn Anderson and Doom would walk to the ring at the Clash of the Champions. A coin toss would be held to choose a member of each team to face off. If Flair or Anderson won, they'd receive a tag team title match at Starrcade. If they lost, Long would get $200,000. However, Long said it wasn't enough money. A vignette aired featuring Paul Lee Dangerously, who entered a bar called Naughty's Emporium. He asked the bartender if she knew about a guy that could solve problems. She directed him to the back of the bar, where Paul met the Motor City Madman. Paul asked the Madman if he could help take care of Lex Luger. The Madman said, "Consider it done." Jim Ross again moderated an offer from Ric Flair to Teddy Long, with the purse raising to $500,000. Long again declined, saying he'd have another offer for Flair later in the show. Later, Long revealed his deal, saying that he wants Flair's limousine and his 65-foot yacht. Flair was irate, saying, "You're out of your mind, pal." The Black Scorpion delivered a message, saying he'd only agree to a confrontation with Sting under 3 conditions. First, it would have to be on national television. Second, he wants to be locked inside the safety of a cage to prevent any physical harm. Finally, he wants the opportunity to show everyone his ability to perform black magic. Sting agreed to any and all stipulations. Jim Ross moderated another confrontation between Ric Flair and Teddy Long. Flair shook Long's hand, saying that the bet was on. The November 10th edition of NWA Pro saw Paulie Dangerously host the Danger Zone. His guest was Stan the Lariat Hansen, who voiced his disgust for Lex Luger. Holding up his bull rope, Hansen said that Luger was going to have a difficult time getting to him. In the main event, Arn Anderson defended the World Television Championship against Terry Taylor. Anderson had the upper hand for the first part of the bout, desperately making multiple pinfall attempts. Taylor made a comeback, refusing to give up as Anderson frantically tried to end the match. The 10-minute time limit expired, with Anderson retaining his title. The November 10th episode of World Championship Wrestling aired a vignette featuring Paulie Dangerously and the Motor City Madman. Paul wanted to see what the Madman could do in the ring, with the Madman easily pummeling 5 enhancement talents in an empty arena. The Madman looked into the camera and said, "Luger, I'm ready for you." The 320-pounder known as the Big Cat made his debut, decimating his opponent to send a message to Lex Luger. WCW World Heavyweight Champion Sting competed against beautiful Bobby Eaton in a back-and-forth encounter that saw the fans rally behind the Stinger. Eaton gained the advantage by attacking the previously injured knee of the champion. Eerie music played over the speakers, which only fueled Sting, who connected with a Stinger splash. Just when Sting applied the Scorpion Deathlock, the music again played, with the voice of the Black Scorpion encouraging the champion to focus. This allowed Eaton to regain the advantage as the Black Scorpion continued to taunt Sting. Eaton charged at Sting, who backdropped him over the top rope, causing a disqualification. The Scorpion said, "Sting loses for the first time on TV." 2 unnamed enhancement talents attacked Sting, with the champion fighting them off. The legendary Ox Baker introduced his newest client, the Night Stalker, who carried a giant battle axe. It didn't take long for the Night Stalker to pick up a pinfall victory in an enhancement match. Flying Brian Pillman was in action against Rip Rogers in a fast-paced encounter. They blistered one another with thunderous chops to the chest. Rogers leapt off the top rope, connecting with a double axe handle onto Pillman on the floor. Back in the ring, Rogers continued to wear down Pillman until Pillman connected with a springboard splash onto Rogers on the floor. Pillman followed up with an atomic drop and a clothesline before bringing the action back into the ring. Just when Pillman climbed to the top, Rogers shook the ropes, causing Pillman to land crotch first onto the top turnbuckle. Pillman blocked a superplex and sent Rogers crashing to the mat. This allowed Pillman to connect with a high crossbody onto Rogers and score a pinfall victory. Teddy Long snuck into Ric Flair's limo, immediately getting kicked out. Long walked down a ramp to Flair's 65-foot yacht named the Magnificent Obsession. As Long gazed at the yacht, he said, "As bad as I hate to say it, Ric Flair really knows how to live the life." Despite being told to leave, Long welcomed himself to tour the yacht. He danced around to Doom's entrance music and said that he was going to change the name of the boat to the Godfather's Soul Machine. Jim Ross and Bob Caudle presented Teddy Long with a gift that had his name on it. Long wasn't interested in opening the present, leaving it in the hands of Caudle. At the end of the broadcast, Long agreed to open the gift. Ross cut him off, saying they were out of time. The November 17th edition of NWA Pro saw Arn Anderson grant Terry Taylor a rematch for the World Television Championship. Another competitive bout ensued, once again ending in a 10-minute time limit draw. The November 17th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Jim Ross and a present-carrying Bob Caudle interview Teddy Long. Finally opening his gift, Long revealed a chauffeur's outfit and a contract. Ross read the fine print, saying that if Doom lose at the Clash of the Champions, Long will be the Horseman's chauffeur for a day. Long became irate, saying that he wasn't going to be anybody's chauffeur. The World Heavyweight Champion Sting scored a pinfall victory over the Nature Boy Buddy Landel. Following the bout, eerie music began blasting through the speakers, with the voice of the Black Scorpion booming through. Sting soon found himself in the ring with a gang of enhancement talents surrounding him on the floor. Suddenly, the referee removed his shirt, using it to choke Sting. Lex Luger, Flying Brian Pillman, and the Z-Man Tom Zink fought off a slew of enhancement talent while Sting threw the referee aside. The Clash of the Champions 13, Thanksgiving Thunder, took place on November 21st from Jacksonville, Florida. We saw Mike Rotunda reveal that he'd legally changed his name to Michael Wall Street. Dressed in a suit, Wall Street introduced his manager, Alexandra York, who was equipped with a printout of a strategy devised by her computer that would guarantee her client victory. Wall Street was victorious, defeating his opponent the Starblazer with his finishing move, the Wall Street Crash. Tony Schiavone interviewed the Total Package Lex Luger, only to be interrupted by the Big Cat. Luger wasn't impressed, punching the Big Cat in the mouth and walking away unscathed. The Big Cat held his jaw and said that Luger had made a big mistake. Lex Luger made his entrance to face the Motor City Madman, but was ambushed by Big Cat. The two brawled on the ramp, with officials breaking things up. Luger went on to defeat the Madman with a lariat. Paulie Dangerously hosted the Danger Zone, introducing his guest, the World Heavyweight Champion, Sting. The Black Scorpion appeared on the ramp and dragged a fan by the arm. He proceeded to put a box over the fan's head, twisting it around completely with the fan unharmed. The Black Scorpion then pressed the fan over his head, walking up the aisle and putting the fan in a cage. After pulling the red sheet over the cage, the Scorpion performed more black magic, pulling the sheet away to reveal a leopard. The Scorpion climbed onto a platform, covered himself in a blue curtain, and said, "Catch me if you can, Sting." This caused the champion to race to the stage, with the sheet falling off the box to reveal that the Black Scorpion had disappeared. Theodore R. Long led the World Tag Team Champions Doom to the ring, with the Nature Boy Ric Flair and Arn Anderson introduced next. Referee Nick Patrick made the coin toss, determining that the match would be between Butch Reed and Flair. Anderson interfered, attacking Reed on the floor to shift the momentum in Flair's favor. Not to be outdone, Ron Simmons interfered, attacking Flair behind the referee's back. Reed locked Flair in a figure-4 leg lock, with the Nature Boy screaming in pain. Anderson aided Flair in reaching the ropes, with the referee pulling Reed by the hair to break the hold. Reed covered Flair, with Anderson pulling the referee out of the ring to break the count. Leaping off the top rope, Reed clipped Flair with a flying shoulder tackle. Long argued with the referee, with nobody to count Reed's pinfall attempt. Flair backdropped Reed over the top rope, landing on the referee and Long. Simmons clotheslined Flair, with Reed making the cover. Anderson entered the ring with a steel chair, bashing Reed across the back. With the referee back in the ring, Flair picked up the pinfall victory. This meant that Flair and Anderson would receive a tag team title shot at Starrcade. It also meant that Long would be the chauffeur of the Horsemen for a day. The November 23rd episode of the Power Hour saw the Nature Boy Ric Flair in action against the Nature Boy Buddy Landel. Flair was ruthless, taking the fight to the floor and dropping Landel throat first on a steel guardrail. Back in the ring, Flair planted Landel with a belly-to-belly suplex and scored the pinfall victory. The November 24th episode of NWA Pro saw Arn Anderson defend the World Television Championship against Terry Taylor. Nature Boy Ric Flair came to ringside, cheering on Anderson, who had his hands full with Taylor. Teddy Long chased Flair around ringside, while Doom attacked Anderson to cause a disqualification. The November 24th episode of World Championship Wrestling featured a vignette with Michael Wall Street. He conducted a meeting with bankers concerning where to move his money to maximize growth. Wall Street was asked about a call he received from a Mr. Finkel that was looking for a donation for a children's charity. He said that he wasn't interested in giving his money to any snotty-nosed brats. Alexandra York took notes as Wall Street talked about inheriting a large sum of money. Wall Street said, "Greed is good." He said that his goal was to become the next World Heavyweight Champion. York talked about the money they've invested to create a computer program that breaks down every wrestler on the roster. This program, in theory, would give Wall Street the perfect strategy to defeat any opponent. York demonstrated the program, typing away on the computer and printing out a strategy for Wall Street, who said, "It's perfect." Tony Schiavone interviewed Jim Herd, who said that the United States champion Stan the Lariat Hansen has abused their organization and they're not going to take it anymore. Hansen entered, saying he's refusing to defend his title against Lex Luger. Herd said that Hansen would defend the title against Luger at Starrcade despite Hansen's bickering. The December 1st edition of World Championship Wrestling saw the Nature Boy Ric Flair introduce Teddy Long, who was uncomfortably in his chauffeur's outfit. Flair forced Long to open the door for him and call him Mr. Flair. Long drove the limo, taking a detour, with Flair becoming irate. Flair exited the limo, only to be ambushed by a flock of enhancement talent. Doom showed up, posing with Flair's limo, while Long cut a promo to hype their upcoming match at Starrcade. Long and Doom left with Flair's limo, leaving the Nature Boy hurt on the pavement. Bob Caudle interviewed Arn Anderson and the returning Barry Windham, who were furious by Doom's attack on Ric Flair. Anderson said, "You jump us, we take a head." The December 8th edition of World Championship Wrestling saw Flying Brian Pillman in action against Rip Rogers. A great back-and-forth encounter ensued, with Rogers dropping a double axe handle off the top rope onto Pillman on the floor. Back in the ring, Rogers continued to wear down Pillman, who battled back valiantly. Both men attempted high cross bodies, colliding in midair. Rogers attempted a suplex, with Pillman wiggling free and landing on the apron. Pillman connected with Air Pillman and picked up a pinfall victory. The December 15th episode of NWA Pro saw the Fabulous Freebirds and Little Richard Marley attack Ricky Morton and Tommy Rich, who had just won a tag team match. Big Van Vader stood in the aisle with his Mastodon helmet on. Smoke shot from the helmet, with Vader taking it off and entering the ring. Vader attacked the Freebirds, saving Morton and Rich. Starrcade took place on December 16th at the Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, Missouri. Tony Schiavone interviewed the United States champion, Stan the Lariat Hansen, who explained the rules of a bull rope match. Hansen and Lex Luger would be attached at the wrist by a bull rope, with the match ending once one wrestler could drag his opponent around the ring, touching all four corners in succession. With tobacco dripping out of his mouth, he said that he was coming for the 4 count. Hansen defended the United States Championship against Lex Luger in a bull rope match. It was a hard-hitting battle from the start, with both men brawling around the ring. Hansen got involved, using the rope to hang Luger over the top rope. Luger fought back, tugging on the bull rope to send Hansen's head bouncing off a steel ring post. Dragging Hansen around the ring, Luger touched 3 corners and was fingertips away from the 4th. Hansen let go of the rope, causing Luger to crash into the 4th corner, but crush the referee in the process. Luger checked on the referee, only to get bashed across the back of the skull by Hansen's boot. A second official came in as Hansen dragged Luger around the ring to touch all 4 corners. Just as the second official declared Hansen the winner, the initial official objected. Luger clotheslined Hansen out of the ring, with the original referee Randy Anderson declaring the total package the new United States champion. With Ric Flair injured, Barry Windham joined the World Television Champion Arn Anderson to battle the World Tag Team Champions Doom in a street fight. It was a brawl from the get-go, with all 4 battling on the ramp and around ringside. In short order, Butch Reed used the belt buckle of his weight belt to bust open Windham. Moments later, Windham got a hold of the weight belt and began whipping Ron Simmons in the ring. Meanwhile on the floor, Anderson smashed a steel chair over the head of Reed. Soon, both members of Doom were bleeding, with the battle raging on. Back in the ring, all 4 battled, with Windham suplexing Simmons off the top rope. Across the ring, Reed launched off the top rope, smashing onto a bloody Anderson with a shoulder block. Simmons blocked a chair shot, bouncing it back into the face of Anderson for a 2 count. In a controversial finish, Wyndham covered Reed while Simmons covered Anderson. The referee made the 3 count, but both teams continued fighting. As both teams continued to battle up the ramp, the match was declared a draw. The Steiner brothers faced the Great Muta and Mr. Saito in the finals of the Pat O'Connor Memorial Tournament. With the referee distracted, a desperate Muta used the ring bell to bash Rick Steiner over the head. Scott Steiner tagged in and cleaned house, even hitting Muta with an impressive Tiger Bomb. Saito and Muta worked together, drilling Scott with a spike pile driver. Rick dove off the top rope, rolling up Saito with a sunset flip out of nowhere to score the pinfall victory. Jim Herd presented the Steiner brothers with a massive 7-foot trophy. In the main event, Sting defended the World Heavyweight Championship against the Black Scorpion in a steel cage match, with Dick the Bruiser serving as the special guest referee. Things were strange from the start, with 4 different Black Scorpions marching to the ring. A black pod descended upon the ramp. Smoke emerged from it, opening to reveal the true Black Scorpion. Sting entered the cage, with the mysterious Scorpion taking the fight to him. The champion dove at the Scorpion, who moved, with Sting crashing against the cage. Still, Sting battled back, only slowed down once the Scorpion stuck his thumb in the champion's eye. The Scorpion bounced Sting repeatedly against the cage, but the champion refused to stay down. Sting connected with a Stinger Splash and locked in the Scorpion Deathlock, with the Scorpion making it to the ropes. After breaking the hold, Sting ripped off the Scorpion's mask, revealing a second mask. Sting bounced the Scorpion repeatedly off the cage, tossing him against it a final time via a press slam. The Scorpion staggered to his feet, with blood soaking through the mask. Sting leaped off the top rope, connecting with a high cross body to score the pinfall victory. The other 4 Black Scorpions raced into the cage, with Sting and Dick the Bruiser fighting them off. Arn Anderson and Barry Windham knocked out the Bruiser and ambushed Sting. Anderson DDT'd Sting onto a steel chair, with the Scorpion using the same chair to bash the champion. The Steiner brothers used bolt cutters to break into the cage, which provided the opening for Sting to rip the mask off of the Black Scorpion. Jim Ross said, "The Black Scorpion is Ric Flair." The December 22nd episode of World Championship Wrestling saw the Z-Man Tom Zink defeat Dutch Mantel to pick up his 45th straight victory. Following the bout, Paul E. Dangerously interviewed Zink, who would be receiving a world television title shot the following week. Out came the champion Arn Anderson, who cut a promo on Zink, saying he doesn't cut it, and referred to himself as a world-class athlete. Zink said he'd be there next week. The WCW World Heavyweight Champion Sting cut a promo, saying that the only thing Ric Flair accomplished was making him sick. Ric Flair cut a promo, saying that this is the real voice that will haunt Sting. Flair said that he was coming for the World Heavyweight Championship. He said he was more determined than ever before, looking to become a 7-time world champion. The December 29th episode of World Championship Wrestling saw Arn Anderson defend the World Television Championship against the Z-Man Tom Zink. Anderson feigned a knee injury, sucker punching Zink while trying to run out the clock. The champion wore down Zink, honing in on the back of the Z-Man. Zink persevered, nailing Anderson with a missile dropkick and picking up the pinfall victory to become the new World Television Champion. How would the Four Horsemen retaliate in the new year? Find out next time on Squared Circle History when we continue our WCW arc and cover WCW in 1991. If you'd like to support the show, you can follow us on Instagram at squared.circle.history, or you can buy a t-shirt at Pro Wrestling Tees by searching Squared Circle History or Pro Wrestling Rushmore. Thank you for tuning in, and keep dropping elbows.